Good evening, members. Please be seated.
You swear there, and then there's a fresh jug of.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good evening, Lord Mayor. You well?
I'm well. I'm well. So, good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of Council. As usual, this meeting is being webcast so that residents and other members of the public have the chance to see it live or to view it on demand later if they so wish. Regarding the evacuation procedure, in the unlikely event of an emergency requiring us to evacuate the building, please make yourselves aware of the emergency exits and follow the instructions of the security staff who are present this evening. As usual, I would remind everyone to continue to behave respectfully and appropriately. I would like us to have a good, productive debate tonight with as many members as possible getting the opportunity to have their say. Would also like to remind members at this stage that the guillotine will fall 3 hours and 40 minutes after the start of the meeting. I intend to have one break tonight during our meeting at an appropriate point for 15 minutes. Would also like to state at this point that I intend to vary the order of business on the agenda in order to bring forward agenda item 13, urgent business members' allowances, so as to deal with it before the notices of motion at item 8. We will now move on with our meeting, which I hope will be clear and constructive. So far as apologies are concerned, I have received apologies for this evening from Councillors Galvin and Callum Taylor. Do members have any further apologies to report? There are 3 further apologies. Can I have Councillors Heaton, Rowley, and which one was that? Derek one. Sorry, Councillor Derek one. Yes, he's the 3rd one. Mobile phone, Councillor Webb.
Add Councillor Barnes to the list of apologies, please. Thank you.
Thank you. That will be recorded. Thank you. Regarding mobile phones and devices, can I remind members and officers to please turn mobile phones to silent and to mute any other electronic equipment for the duration of the council meeting. Thank you. Turning now to conduct of the meeting, can I remind everyone as usual to speak clearly during debate and to use your microphones. Can you also please remember to switch off your microphone after speaking? Please indicate that you wish to speak by pressing the button. I will then call upon you to speak at the appropriate time. To help us get through business effectively tonight, I'd be grateful if we could keep the meeting focused and to the point. I will keep us on track if I feel we are being irrelevant. Declaration of interests. May I ask all members who have a personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest in any of the business to be discussed at tonight's meeting to declare your interest now, if you have not already done so, in advance of the register of interests. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. It's regarding item 8.3, introduction of council tax premium for second homes.
Thank you. Was there another one down there? No, just the one. Okay.
I think if I may, Chair, there's some advice needed in relation to second homes, which if members are comfortable, I will provide at the break, and then declarations for the second homes issue can be made immediately before that item begins.
Thank you. Okay, that's clarified that. Right, turning to the approval of the last meeting's minutes. Do I have a member's approval to sign the minutes of the council meeting held on the 20th of October, 2022? Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Now we have a number of civic announcements. I would like, it's my regrettable duty, I would like us to observe a minute's silence in memory of Andrew Digwood, former undersheriff who died last month in November. May we have that minute's silence now, please? Thank you, members. Second civic announcement I wish to make is to say that the City Council has received some gifts from the Women's Rugby World Cup teams, namely Australia, France, Cook Islands and New Zealand. They've been placed with officers for safekeeping and future use. My third announcement tonight is to invite the Liberal Democrat group to nominate the Lord Mayor-elect for the municipal year 2023 to 24. Council Leader.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's always a great honour to propose a new Lord Mayor, and I'm delighted tonight to propose my colleague, Councillor Chris Colwick, as the Lord Mayor-elect for the upcoming 2023-24 civic year. That is not deja vu, and I'm not reading the wrong script, but having already served as Lord Mayor with distinction, I know that colleagues will agree when I describe Chris as a dedicated servant to our city, having lived in York since 1984 and having helped establish various initiatives in the city, including food banks, Street Angels, the York Schools and Youth Trust, Family Matters, the Spurrigate Meeting Place, and the One Voice Trust. Chris will be supported by his wife, Joy, who knows well the importance of the Civic Party and, of course, the role of Lady Mayoress. I know that during their last civic year, both Chris and Joy had to navigate the complications of the pandemic, having had their first ever COVID-secure Lord Mayor-making day. So I hope that this upcoming civic year will allow them a full year this time and the freedom to support the city in the way they see best. I am absolutely confident that Chris and Joy will once again give it their utmost to represent our city and uphold the traditions of the mayoralty. In the coming months, there will be future opportunities to say more. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Council Leader. Councillor Colwick, congratulations. Do you wish to respond at all on that?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And I thank my colleagues for putting my name forward as the Lord Mayor-elect for the next civic year. It's right to say that the previous civic year was somewhat impacted by the effects of the pandemic. Nevertheless, it was a great privilege, and it will be a great privilege to have the opportunity of serving the city in the coming civic year. I'll take the opportunity, if I may, of announcing the sheriff for the next civic year. And I'm delighted that my colleague and friend, Councillor Sue Hunter, has kindly agreed to serve as sheriff and will be supported by her partner, Nigel Goodwin, as her consort. I'm delighted. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Colwick, and congratulations to both you and Councillor Hunter. We now come to the public participation session. We have 10 people registered to speak at this meeting. 8 of our speakers are attending in person, and 2 will join the meeting by remote means. The speakers participating remotely will join with the assistance of the technical team. After speaking, they'll be asked to leave the Zoom call before I move to the next speaker. Speakers cannot participate any further in the meeting, but are welcome to continue watching by viewing the live webcast. Those speaking in person are seated in this room tonight, and each will be invited in turn to come up to the microphone and address the meeting. After speaking, each will return to their seat if they wish to stay for the remainder of the meeting. I will now invite the speakers attending remotely to speak first, and our first remote speaker is Professor Andy Gouldson, who would like to speak on the executive recommendation in respect of the 10-year strategies at item 6 on the agenda, specifically in relation to the climate change strategy. Professor Gouldson, you have 3 minutes, and I will be very precise on that. But please take the opportunity now of speaking. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. So I am speaking here tonight as the co-director of the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission, and it's a pleasure to comment on your strategy and 10-year plan. At the Yorkshire and Humber level, we know that energy costs are spiralling. This year, energy costs for Yorkshire and Humber in total have gone up from £10 billion a year to £19 billion a year. And research from the University of York suggests that fuel poverty rates in January will be 70% of all households. So this is a massive economic and social issue as well as an environmental one. And on the climate impact side, and obviously York knows about these all too well, after the droughts in the summer, we are now predicting that climate impacts will cost the region £1.5 billion this year, but that's forecast to go to £4.5 billion by 2050. So again, it's a huge issue. So we need to do something bold and ambitious on climate change, and the City of York strategy sets out a range of ambitious actions on both net zero and adaptation, which I think are to be commended. It recognises that buildings and transport are the main sectors in terms of emissions, but it also talks about the need for clear engagement and also good governance to deliver on these ambitious targets that York has set. And on the adaptation side and the links to the natural environment, York has made some very ambitious actions under Councillor Widdowson's leadership, especially around the area of nature-based solutions and natural flood management. So I think the plan is clear, it's deliverable, it's practicable, and it's ambitious. And it's one of the better strategies across the UK in terms of turning a bold ambition into a deliverable plan. And I think the benefits for York will be tangible socially, in terms of reducing fuel poverty and the disruption of flooding, economically in terms of the massive energy bills and the cost of living crisis, and crucially, obviously, environmentally, where York will be doing its bit to contribute to a global crisis that we need to address with urgency and ambition. So I commend the plan to you. I'm very pleased that York will kind of enact the Yorkshire plan at a city scale, and we look forward to working with you in the future to help you deliver it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gouldson, and your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that recommendation is debated. I now call on the second remote speaker, Flick Williams, who would like to speak on the report of the Scrutiny Chair at agenda item 11. Flick Williams, you have 3 minutes, please.
To quote the chair of the Customer and Corporate Services Management Committee, scrutiny can and should be a tool which can benefit everyone in helping to ensure the effective and purposeful running of the council. I should like to thank Councillor Crawshaw for his invitation to stakeholder groups of disabled and older people to the November meeting to scrutinise the city centre access strategy and the progress, or lack thereof, of mitigations 1 year on from the decision to permanently exclude blue badge holders from the foot streets, an illuminating meeting on many levels. In 2017, this council identified co-production as a way of delivering public services in an equal and reciprocal relationship between professionals and people using services in order to create better services and outcomes. Yet so many groups complain of consultation fatigue, the feeling that they are endlessly asked for their opinion, which appears to change nothing and leaves an impression of having gone through the motions of satisfying the legal requirements of consultation. It was my understanding that Liberal Democrats believed in evidence-based policy and decision-making, yet I know also the Economy and Place Scrutiny Chair's comments that there continue to be frustration surrounding the preparation and content of reports which have not contained the requested information. How can this authority make sound decisions without either the requisite data or respecting the lived experience of its citizens? There is one decision that is crying out for proper scrutiny, and that is the continued use of the council chamber. You meet today in the Guildhall, but I'm led to understand that once again the decision is for this meeting only, and so we are going to do it all again, rinse and repeat. I struggle to understand why Liberal Democrat leadership cannot seem to recognise, despite the report of an independent access consultant, that the chamber is inaccessible for many and does not meet the requirements of 21st century democracy. The only argument I've heard is a woolly appeal to history and tradition, wholly inadequate justification that results in its defenders deploying ludicrous arguments about councillor so-and-so who managed to drag themselves up the stairs before there was a lift, or councillor other person who was allowed to sit at the end to let their legs stick out. You keep printing the public sector equality duty in papers. Do you actually understand it at all? This issue paints you as less than serious people. Every other political group has accepted the facts of the matter. Why, Liberal Democrats, do you struggle so? Looking at you sat there at the last meeting, I've reached my conclusions as to why. Others will no doubt do the same. Furthermore, we have received a decision from the Information Commissioner's office that has found in our favour and against the council for failing to produce both the Access Audit Report and any legal advice received. So let's have it all out in the open, please, including the financial implications. An open and effective council as elections fast approach in May 2023.
Flick Williams, I'm going to have to stop you there. That's 3 minutes, I'm afraid. But thank you for your contribution. Your comments have been noted and they'll be taken into account when that report is received. Thank you for your contribution. I now move to the speakers attending in person here tonight and call upon our third speaker, Gwen Swinburne, who would like to speak on matters relevant to the City Council, namely governance issues. Gwen Swinburne. And 3 minutes.
Can we hear like this? Yes? Yeah, good. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I had a dream that after the last monitoring officer departed, that Mr. Floyd, responsible director and chief operating officer, would finally get control of our appalling democratic governance. But no, it seems we are lurching from one embarrassing fiasco and cover-up to another. For the want of proper notices in September, we had to cancel a whole week of meetings. Not once, but the same basic mistake was made twice. Now, for the lack of a proper forward plan to executive and forward plan management, the two most important items on this morning's executive agenda, the council 10-year strategy and the budget, needed late notice protocols. Instead of a simple mea culpa, the usual farcical excuses were proffered by management, instead of honestly taking ownership of their failings. Tonight's governance outrage, members wanting even more money, has been slipped in late and silently onto the agenda. Last item, of course, very discreet. This anonymous supplement appears nothing more than a fast and loose attempt by some or all members, aided and abetted by management, to award themselves each a nice fat £673 cheque on top of the authorised remuneration panel increase they already have. The independent remuneration panel is the proper and I thought only process. It means every 4 years, your choice, after the elections, your choice, which has worked to you to date. This is until some, that is until some or all members felt cheated that the staff got an extra payout and they didn't. Rather than wait just 4 months for any extras, these members try to circumvent the proper process and award themselves the money now. This whole business is far more distasteful and it's obscene. Trying to push through self-awarded extras without proper commissioning, consultation or scrutiny by the remuneration panel or us is a disgrace. I fail to understand how statutory officers permitted this, as it is so wrong on every level, and even possibly an unlawful circumvention of agreed processes. Just imagine if we could all just self-award pay rises at our convenience. Finally, Lord Mayor, may I just want to thank Ben Fry for all the work he did as bellman for the city. I know we haven't had a proper reception here, but I think on the behalf of citizens, I'd like to do that. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Gwen Swinburne, and that was dead on 3 minutes. Your comments have been noted, and I'm sure they'll be taken into account at the appropriate time. I now call upon the fourth speaker, Lawrence Beardmore, who would like to speak on the executive recommendation on the 10-year strategies at agenda item 6 in relation to the climate change strategy. Mr. Beardmore.
Lord Mayor, many thanks. I'm Lawrence Beardmore, speaking on behalf of York and North Yorkshire Chambers of Commerce. I support the approach taken by the development of the 3 strategies: climate change, health and well-being, and economic development, and the importance of considering them together under a single strategic city vision. Specifically with regards to the climate change strategy, We now live in a time where it's broadly accepted that climate change is one of the most important items on any agenda. This is evidenced by the increasing severity and frequency of climate effects globally, nationally, and locally. We all have a part to play in reversing our damaging path, and targeting local action is as important, if not more, than waiting for a coherent national plan to appear. York has taken a lead in announcing its 2030 net zero ambition, this being some 20 years earlier than the national target and ahead of the regional ambition by 4 years. The York Climate Strategy is built from a scientific report developed by the University of Leeds 2 years ago and developed much further by the council through Sean Gibbons' carbon reduction team. The result is this ambitious yet deliverable strategy with an associated action plan. It's akin to the strategies and action plans that I create for commercial organizations, being consistent, coherent, effective, and appropriate, although I would include complex due to the number of moving parts. As president of the York and North Yorkshire Chambers of Commerce, I'm delighted that businesses have been seriously consulted and involved. And indeed, our own Andrew Digwood was deeply involved in the York Climate Commission during his time. We know we have a great part to play. Indeed, my own business is now formally creating a sustainability strategy and plan aimed at lowering our carbon footprint, reducing waste, and maximizing the benefits of the circular economy. We are particularly passionate about phasing out all types of plastic packaging and are making great progress in this area. All these actions are not only good for the environment, but are also good for business with the potential to lower costs, increase revenues, and enhance our reputation. Unfortunately, as an SME-sized business, we are currently a rarity in undertaking this activity within our peer group, emphasizing the need for a coherent and effective local action. The climate strategy simplifies for business what we can do, where we can find the expertise and resources to support the delivery of net zero. The Chamber will play its part in encouraging businesses to become more sustainable, and this strategy and plan will be a powerful catalyst for change. However, one word of caution. We must also continue to listen to our already wounded and beleaguered businesses now dealing with a recession and support them where necessary. As we move forward, a continuing dialogue and consultation will be important, as will the ability to employ common sense solutions within the net zero plan. In the medium...
Thank you, Mr. Beardmore. That's 3 minutes, I'm afraid. So thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Your comments have been noted and they will be taken into account when that recommendation is debated. Our fifth speaker is Professor Charlie Jeffrey, who would also like to speak about the climate change strategy. Professor Jeffrey, you've got 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Charlie Jeffrey, Vice-Chancellor of the University of York. I'm also Chair of Higher York, the partnership of all universities and colleges in the city. And I've had the privilege as a member of the York Partnership to offer ideas into the development of the 10-year plan. And the outcome for me is very good, both in substance with the 3 pillars of economic development, health and well-being and climate change, but also in approach, seeing these pillars as ones we need to progress collaboratively. City of York has a real advantage in its scale. It's not a big city. It's a size where you can get key stakeholders around a table where you can really build shared purpose. And on that basis, we can be really ambitious. And we're certainly that in Higher York. Through our research, we can bring expertise, ideas, innovation, products, without which economic development, better health and a low carbon society would be far harder to achieve. And our graduates are an indispensable source of talent without which we would have little chance of achieving our economic health and climate goals. Councillors will have heard me talk at length elsewhere on economy and health, so I wanted to focus on climate this evening. The University of York, we're deeply involved in developing the York Climate Change Strategy, chairing the York Climate Commission, and bringing our expertise and talent to bear, but also recognising that we're a large part of the city's challenge and that our own commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030 is codependent with the city's commitment. It'll be hard to achieve those commitments, but the vision that's been set out in the strategy is strong, and the approach, the plan for decarbonisation is stretching but sensible, or even sensibly stretching, because this is something we just have to do, however hard it is. But that's where York's special capacity for collaboration and shared purpose comes in. Through that, I think we can turn the challenge of decarbonisation from one often portrayed as a hard but necessary burden into opportunity. Opportunity in the future economy where new sectors will emerge and grow, like the circular bioeconomy, which our Bio Yorkshire programme is driving on. An opportunity in health and well-being that will emerge as we decarbonise and remove some of the drivers of ill health that we face. And I think that point about interdependency is crucial. The ambitious climate strategy that we, organisations and people across the city have helped to develop is surely necessary to meet the greatest threat facing our planet, climate change. But it will also bring with it the economic opportunity and improved well-being that our city in its 10-year plan aspires to. So I commend the plan and its underlying strategies to you. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Professor Jeffrey, for your contribution, and your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that recommendation is debated. I now call upon our sixth speaker, James Farrer, who would also like to speak about the climate change strategy. Mr. Farrer, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'm James Farrer, Chief Executive of the York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership. We're also responsible for leading the development of the route map to carbon negativity York and North Yorkshire level. As previous speakers have said, I fully support the 10-year plan. Joining up health, climate and economy is fundamental. And there's 2 key points I would like to make that this creates. The first is that there's a social and environmental need to do it. But more importantly, reflecting what Charlie Jeffrey just said, it creates huge opportunity for the city. And there are a number of 3 things I think you need to take into account. Firstly, York City Council cannot do this alone. Collaboration will be key, and we've heard that from various speakers. This strategy has been structured with this in mind. The 8 key themes and 5 guiding principles make it easy for partners to understand how to engage and where they can contribute. And that is really, really important. If we look at this in the context of opportunities it creates for the city, I'd make the following points. Firstly, there's great alignment between this strategy and the regional strategy. If we progress with devolution, that will position York in a great place to suck down additional investment to deliver. Secondly, a city with a plan will attract investment. That's what experience tells us. And further, any city needs to, any place needs to understand its USP. And York has a really proud track record of innovation in this space. We have great universities and innovators in this space will want civic leadership. This plan shows that level of civic leadership. York has shown a real ambition, for example, with its buses and its cycle lanes. It now needs to capitalise on the progress. It is big enough to be significant. It is small enough to be able to deliver and manage it. The strategy has been developed by the city, for the city, and it creates a platform. The LEP is committed to supporting this. What really brings this to light is the community-led local approach to complement our regional strategy. Together, they fit hand in glove. And I'll finish with reiterating a further point. A city with a plan will attract investment. We need to make sure that York is in that camp. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrer, for that contribution. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account, as I said before, when that recommendation is debated. I now call upon our 7th speaker, Alex McCallion, who also wishes to speak about the climate change strategy. Mr. McCallion, you've got 3 minutes, and if you wish to say which organisation, if any, you represent, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Alex McCallion. I am the Director of Works and Precinct at York Minster, and I'm here this evening to speak in support of the climate strategy and the importance of considering the strategies together as part of a single vision for the city to 2035. A climate emergency has been recognised worldwide. City of York Council has set an ambition for York to be a carbon net zero city by 2030. As has been said before, this is 20 years earlier than the national target and ahead of the regional ambition of 2034. This is to be commended. The Church of England has set a similar ambition. We have been very clear in our neighbourhood plan that the greatest threat to the fabric of York Minster and the precinct and our many heritage properties are extreme weather events brought about by the climate emergency. The current fuel crisis also brings the business case for decarbonisation sharply into focus. Chapter have been very clear that they have a moral duty to lead on the sympathetic, technically correct adaptation of its heritage assets to respond to the net zero target. and to make a valid, tangible and material contribution to the mitigation of the impacts our society places on the planet. Just as City of York Council is committed to principled leadership, so is the chapter of York as custodians of the Metropolitical Cathedral of the North. We have the first solar slates on a listed building in the city producing 11,000 kilowatts of power a year, with a second application to follow in January. We have a live application for 199 solar panels on the choir roof, which will generate a third of the power for the Minster. Our Centre of Excellence, which starts on site in the spring, will generate 60% of its energies from renewables. Our neighbourhood plan was created in partnership with the Historic England and the City Council, and we are excited about the opportunities to continue to work collaboratively with you and other organisations. We are particularly pleased to see the sharp focus on increased biodiversity and improving green spaces for residents drawn out in the strategy. This strategy, like our neighbourhood plan, is based on sound consultation and influenced by stakeholders and members of the public. At the United Nations Climate Emergency Change Conference in Paris in 2015, governments agreed that mobilising stronger and more ambitious climate action is urgently required to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. The message of COP27 this autumn is that everyone has a role to play in effectively implementing the Paris Agreement, and City of York Council is setting an example of how strong leadership can galvanise action. And we are demonstrating at York Minster that even a complex heritage estate can move quickly and sensitively towards decarbonisation. I hope these strategies will be adopted so the Council can continue to lead the agenda in decarbonisation, to meet our net zero responsibilities, but to also reduce costs, drive economic opportunities, and improve the quality of life of the residents of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCallion. That was spot on 3 minutes. Your comments have been noted. Thank you for your contribution. And your comments will be taken into account when that recommendation is debated. Our eighth speaker, Gareth Perry, again wishes to speak in relation to climate change strategy. Mr. Perry, I beg your pardon. You have 3 minutes, and if you wish to say which organisation you represent, if any, that would be gratefully received. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm the Forest Management Director for Yorkshire for Forestry England, and I'll restrict my comments to the remit of Forestry England. But as has been said already, climate change is a significant threat to our environment, the economy, health, general quality of life. The 2022 UK assessment outlined impacts on timber, water, power and food supplies. And of course, we're already seeing the consequence of more frequent flooding, drought and wildlife declines. And as has been said, there's a financial cost which is predicted to be 1% of GDP by 2045. So leaders need to tackle these threats head on, however difficult the decisions may be. I'm pleased to see York City showing leadership through this strategy. Climate change will have broad impacts on society, so it's appropriate the strategy has been developed alongside those for health and wellbeing and economic development. I would encourage that climate change is strongly integrated into the other two documents. Forestry England's own Growing the Future strategy combines joint actions for climate, people, the economy and biodiversity, recognising the links between them. The climate strategy has also benefit from linking to the local nature recovery strategy, because biodiversity not only provides the services we need from nature, it provides resilience to the impacts of climate change. The UK is incredibly nature depleted, and this is a huge risk to climate change mitigation and adaptation if left unaddressed. Delivering a strategy is, you could say, is more important than writing one. The New York community woodland that Forestry England is delivering in partnership with the City Council is a great example of this. We're proud that it will be the first of its kind in England, a 78-hectare woodland that will store significant amounts of carbon, increase local biodiversity, reduce flood risk and air pollution, provide shade and cooling, and provide a fantastic new public green space. Forestry England has a commitment of its own to go carbon net zero by 2033, supported by creating over 2,000 hectares of woodland. We also need to dramatically reduce our emissions, but public transport and energy are big challenges that employers like us can't solve alone. If the City Council can deliver the infrastructure and policies that enable others to tackle these areas, that would be very welcome. As has been said, this strategy needs to be delivered in partnership. Building adaptation resilience to climate change is at the heart of Forestry England's approach, and we will always be open to opportunities to expand and connect the nation's forests. Trees have huge potential to tackle climate change, as well as providing other benefits. But of course, trees live a long time, much longer than us, and new woodlands will need care and a long-term funded plan to provide this. To finish, I'd like to express Forestry England's support for the strategy and the early action to deliver it through the York Community Woodland. This is a vitally important journey, and Forest England stands here as a willing partner to support delivery through the nation's forests.
Thank you, Mr. Parry. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that recommendation is debated. Our ninth speaker is Sarah Loftus, who again wishes to speak about the climate change strategy. And again, if you'd like to tell us which organisation, if any, you represent, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sarah Loftus, Make It York Managing Director. Make It York is pleased to support the approach taken in the three strategies: climate change, health and wellbeing, economic development, and we welcome all three of these being brought together in a single vision for the city. Climate change is the highest threat facing our planet. It requires leadership in action if we are to make a difference. The strategy is ambitious, and Make It York are committed to working with the local authority to help deliver the strategy. Reducing the impact we have on the environment will be critical for the development of the tourism and hospitality sector. Make It York is committed to helping the council to reach the ambitious targets they have set out in the delivery plan. We particularly support a number of elements within the strategy. We welcome the partnership approach and the focus of the strategy being about sharing of knowledge to help people and organisations play their part. We support the emphasis on continuously adapting to change and looking at new technologies. As an organisation, we are trying to implement this by doing our own events differently and managing our services differently, with carbon savings in mind. We support that the strategy has identified as a key focus the commitment to invest in people. The commitment to train and upskill the workforce will be critical to bring about changes we need, especially in how we use, manage and value our natural resources. Make It York will also play its part in delivering the strategy by undertaking three activities. Firstly, as an organisation, we will appoint a sustainable champion to bring about a change in our day-to-day practices to reduce our carbon footprint. We have and we will continue to review our contracts, source sustainably, products for our activities, reduce food miles by buying and sourcing locally for our food vendors at our events, and ban the single use of plastic from our events, which we have done this year in the Christmas market. Secondly, we will invest and look for funding to enable the shambles market to become more sustainable. By working with the traders, we have identified a range of activities we would like to undertake, including looking at how to separate waste to divert food waste from landfill, looking at how we can collect cooking oil to reuse as biofuel, looking for grants to fund electric cargo bikes to reduce the vehicle miles and CO2 emissions around the city centre. We want to install refillable stations in the shambles market to reduce the number of plastic bottles used in the city centre. We have applied for the shared prosperity funding to look at introducing solar power into the market. If successful, we will be the second open market in the UK to have this provision. And
I'm going to have to stop you there, Sarah Loftus.
Oh, sorry.
That's 3 minutes, I'm afraid, but thank you for your contribution. We must stick to the 3-minute rule. And thank you for your comments. They will be noted and taken into account when that recommendation is debated. Our final speaker tonight, our 10th and final speaker, is Carl Alsop, who would like to speak about the executive recommendations in relation to the pavement cafe licence update at agenda item 6. Mr. Alsop, you've got 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Carl Alsop. I'm here from the York Business Improvement District. Today I'm here to campaign councillors on behalf of businesses in relation to the decision on pavement cafe licences. My main aim of this evening is to ensure that councillors don't overlook the large impact that having a pavement cafe licence revoked will have on individual businesses. It will immediately force them to lose covers they have become reliant on during this difficult period. It will prevent them from being able to cater for their nervous or more vulnerable clientele that are still not confident to move indoors, and it will stop them having a presence on the street showing the public they are open for hospitality. In addition to these individual impacts, it will impact the overall city, removing the al fresco vibrancy that has enhanced the city over the past couple of years. Even the last couple of weeks at temperatures in the minuses, I have walked around the city on multiple occasions to find numerous full to capacity pavement cafes. It is clearly evident that businesses are desperate for the additional space as much as the city is. The wider world and our city are a very different place now to what they were 3 years ago. Since the beginning of the pandemic, businesses have faced 3 lockdowns, restrictions on opening hours and service methods, supply issues, severe price rises, unpredictable consumer behaviours, staffing shortages, a skills gap, a cost of living crisis, uncertainty in the government, and high interest rates. As a justification to the decision to remove 40 pavement cafes, CYC representatives have suggested in meetings that some businesses didn't have them pre-pandemic anyway. I would argue this is a poor justification. Things have changed significantly for businesses and we live in very different times. I understand why councillors are going to vote through the recommended option this evening, so please can I make a plea to you that accompanies the inevitable upcoming enforcement. As a council, when you are looking at individual pavement cafes, please can you look at any available options to support the businesses rather than proceeding with a blanket enforcement letter. Please can officers visit the businesses, explain the situation, show understanding and offer support wherever possible. Even the ability to retain 2 chairs or a single bench has significantly more value than the sum of its parts when it comes to an on-street presence and flexibility. Please can consultation improve to allow businesses time to plan and react accordingly, both around this issue and future issues in this area. To conclude, I hope councillors will tonight consider the weight of this decision and the impact it will have on businesses and people's livelihoods. Failing that, please can something be put in place that offers businesses the support and understanding they need on the other side of this decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop, and your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that recommendation is debated. That was our final speaker this evening, our final public speaker this evening, and that concludes the public participation session. I now move to item 5 on the agenda, petitions. Notice has been received of 2 petitions to be presented this evening. The council procedure rules allow 1 minute to present a petition to council. The first one is from Councillor Myers to present I now invite him to present the first petition from residents of Westminster Road, Greencliff Drive and the Avenue, seeking options for a low traffic neighbourhood in their area. Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And alongside Councillor Wells, I'm pleased to present this petition to council. The petition asks for, as you've just read, actually, so I'm going to repeat that. It's got 60 seconds. So there has been growing use of these residential streets over many years to cut out the queues at Clifton Green Junction. And there are particular concerns arising from the York Central development, which traffic forecasts show will mean Clifton Green very soon in future years will be over capacity from a number of directions, and also the recent application from St. Peter's School for development there, which would increase traffic also. So we want to support residents to be able to live in neighbourhoods with less through traffic, and we ask council to help deliver this for the benefit of the community. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Myers. I now invite Councillor Baker to present the second petition on behalf of residents of the Bishopthorpe Road area, calling for action to tackle the use of St. Benedict's Road as a rat run. Councillor Baker, a minute, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a slight correction. The petition that I'm presenting today is on behalf of the St. Benedict's Road area residents who live behind Bishopthorpe Road and a couple of the surrounding streets of that area, namely Upper Price Street and Nunthorpe Road. Due to the recent closure of Bishopthorpe Road outside the shops between Nunnery Lane and Scarcroft Road for maintenance back in October, which lasted a total of 3 weeks, I think, and back in 2020 when lockdown caused partial closures of the Bishopthorpe Road High Street for social distancing reasons. Those occasions have highlighted quite serious safety concerns resulting from the increased motorised vehicular use of St Benedict's Road as a shortcut, commonly known as a rat run. We call on City of York Council to take urgent action to tackle this problem as and when Bishopthorpe Road needs to close again.
Councillor Baker, that's more than a minute, I'm afraid. I've got to
Okay, thank
adhere
you.
to strict time programme tonight, please. Can I say to both petition bearing members that in accordance with the council procedure rules, those petitions will be referred to the Customer and Corporate Services Scrutiny Management Committee. Now we move on to item 6. This is the report of the executive leader, questions and executive recommendations. I will invite the leader, Councillor Aspen, to present his written report, which you will all find at page 19 of the council papers. Let me just say before he starts that standing orders allow 5 minutes for presentation of the leader's report and 5 minutes for each and any response by other group leaders. Councillor Aspen.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here with colleagues for our last full council of 2022. And before I go on to discuss the topics in my report, I would just like to thank everybody, our staff, residents, businesses, volunteers, and fellow councillors for all their hard work over the past year. I'll begin with devolution. Colleagues will have seen that the statutory consultation has been live and that the council has been engaging with stakeholders, residents and businesses to seek their views on the arrangements that support the devolution deal. We have now had over 2,000 responses to the consultation, having promoted the consultation online and held engagement sessions in the city's Explore centres. The consultation concludes tomorrow, after which officers will then review and analyse the responses received so it can be presented back to councillors for final consideration of the deal in the new year. If we agree to the deal, along with North Yorkshire, then the feedback from the consultation will be sent to the Secretary of State. On the council's budget, I'm sure most people in this room will acknowledge the huge financial challenges facing local government across the country. Like so many residents and businesses in the city, rising costs for energy, fuel, goods and services is heaping pressure on the council and really compounding the fact that York is historically one of the lowest funded councils by government. Earlier this week, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities issued the latest local government finance policy statement, in which it was pretty bleak reading for councils. And for the first time, it suggested that councils raid already dwindling reserves to protect services. We still await full publication of the financial settlement, hopefully next week, and these details will be crucial in developing the budget proposals for the next financial year. Given the current economic crisis, it will undoubtedly be a difficult budget, and proposals will be published in the new year for colleagues, residents and businesses to review and comment on. At the same time, a range of new information is being advertised to residents for financial support during the winter period. A further 1 million of the Household Support Fund is being rolled out to support as many people as possible, from pensioners to unpaid carers. In addition to this, we are also inviting applications to a discretionary scheme to help residents who are identified as financially vulnerable due to increased utility costs. We know that this funding is a mere drop in the ocean to what is needed, so we will continue to make the case to government for further funding to support residents and businesses. Moving on from the cost of living, York has welcomed 100 families and 86 children as part of the Home Office's Asylum Seeker Accommodation Programme. As part of the city's welcome, Refugee Action York have been holding coffee mornings to meet the families and children, assessing their needs and offering support. This is an incredibly difficult time for many of those families, so I'd like to thank everybody involved in welcoming them to our city and supporting them in their time of need. I would also like to use this opportunity to welcome York's recent A rating for climate leadership by the CDP, a great endorsement of our efforts and proposals to tackle the climate emergency. I'm also incredibly pleased to see progress on numerous capital schemes, for example, to support children with special educational needs and disabilities and help ensure that the city's schools are better equipped to support children with autism, social, emotional and mental health needs. Lastly, I'd like to thank all staff and partners who were involved in preparing for the visit of King Charles III in what was a memorable and historic visit for our city. To particularly congratulate the Lord Mayor for avoiding any eggs, and indeed the Sheriff for successfully batting one away. The only thing is left to say, Lord Mayor, is to wish everyone the very best for the Christmas break, and I look forward to the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen, and yes, you're correct. I'm glad I avoided being splattered by an egg that day. Right, each leader of each group leader now has the ability to respond to the leader's report. Sorry, I'm losing my place. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll start by wishing members, officers and residents a happy Christmas and a restful festive period. The government has yet again left local authorities hanging in financial limbo. The local government settlement is expected next week, likely around the 23rd of December. Unfortunately, it makes me feel good news won't be coming in that announcement. I'll start with the council's budget and the leader's comments about maintaining the capital programme. He's absolutely right about tough decisions needing to be made, which is why I asked him at November's executive what those decisions might be or what his approach will be to taking them. He promised me at that meeting that I would get a response at this morning's December executive meeting. I'm still no clearer. Why is this important? The council has to come in on budget at year end, something that looks increasingly unlikely. The administration will highly likely be plundering reserves. The leader has repeatedly avoided my questions to him about when he's going to start taking budget concerns and the cost of living crisis seriously. Immediate action is needed to both protect the council's frontline services and target available resources to those most in need. This simply can't wait. People in our communities unfortunate to be on prepayment meters in poorly insulated homes are spending £10 a day to heat their homes, £300 a month. That's more than some people's monthly income. Decisions not to refocus the council's priorities during this cost of living crisis are having real consequences every day for many of our most vulnerable residents. Where I'd be more in agreement with the leader is on the shambolic way in which the government is managing the asylum seeker accommodation scheme. We're pleased to see York offering temporary sanctuary, but the absence of proper communication with local authorities about the government's plans is completely unacceptable. It leads to the council and city partners being unable to plan appropriately, accommodation providers in limbo, and asylum seekers without adequate shelter and care. This simply can't go on. I note the leader's comments on climate action and recognise the work that's taking place in addressing the council's own impact on the climate. From the projections I have seen, the council won't reach net zero by 2030 or even 2050. While you remain unwilling to develop an updated transport plan that takes the climate emergency into account, I'm willing to enact a democratic decision of this council passed in 2019, a decision to remove non-essential car journeys from the inside the city walls. Can we say you're prepared to put planet before politics? Of course we can't. Transport is responsible for approaching 30% of carbon emissions in York, yet we're expected to believe that electric buses and electric car usage is going to eliminate those emissions within 7 years. It's living in fantasy land. And how are we expected to meet these goals when public transport is decreasing its role in getting people around, when we need it to be doing the opposite? Your own climate scrutiny chair is unequivocal. No measured pathway with milestones to deliver a zero carbon York, nor set out any process to evaluate all the council's operations against these milestones. That's some ambition. We need to get serious on addressing transport emissions and fast, as organisations like the Civic Trust have tried to help you do. This is especially important if York is to maximise the benefits of becoming part of a mayoral combined authority, or we will simply be left behind. On York Central, another consultation, seemingly another tick box exercise with many residents not informed until after the consultation events had taken place. This is hugely disappointing. The scheme remains under current plans, one in which the council is taking huge amounts of financial risk that's completely disproportionate to its involvement in the development of the site. Of course, we welcome a government hub to the site, potentially by 2027, but there are questions around how many new jobs this might mean for York, with government ministers confirming some of the jobs will move from Imphal Barracks. Finally, we welcome the support provided through the Armed Forces Covenant. It's hugely important that York welcomes our military families, both past and present. Our long military history continues to be celebrated. I look forward to seeing this aspect of the council's work develop further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas, for that response. I believe Councillor Doughty also wishes to make a response. There are 5 minutes allocated for that. Councillor Doughty.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I certainly won't be taking 5 minutes. The leader opens with a reminder that the statutory consultation for devolution closes tomorrow. Of course, while I do believe that devolution is the right aim for York at the present time, not least due to securing a share of the initial £540 million investment by a central government into York and North Yorkshire, I can't help asking what actual meaningful consultation there is. An apparent feature of the majority of consultations is Lib Dem administration. Decisions often made before consultations even close. You'd make Putin proud. Perhaps he should just be honest with residents and at least grasp a modicum of respect by saying, this is what we're doing, and if you don't like it, whistle. Next, he speaks of the challenges of the upcoming council budget and cost of living crisis. Serious, yes it is. Presumably then, he will join me in leading calls later for a freeze when we come to the business of potentially increasing councillor pay, which initially conveniently missed the full council papers, but which was forced onto the agenda so it could not be ushered in entirely under the radar. Of the 10-year strategies, his administration, and whatever the colour the new authority is post-May, should ensure these are not just talking shop merry-go-rounds and insist on evidence they actually achieve anything for the residents in the city and are not just regurgitated every few years without showing who has responsibility, proving what was done effectively and what could have been done better. I share the leader's comments that it was indeed a great honour that our new king and the Queen Consort chose to visit our city so soon, and I thoroughly enjoyed the tiny part I was able to make in welcoming them to York. I also thank the Civic team for the work they did in ensuring this was a memorable occasion and also for the continued work the leader outlines as part of the Armed Forces Covenant. We can be hugely proud of the work of those currently serving in the armed forces, including reservists, and it's only right that we make York a welcoming city for their families and veterans who have done so much for us so that we can live free and in relative peace. Finally, I take this opportunity to wish those who celebrate a very Merry Christmas and a happy and healthy 2023 to everyone. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty, for that response. Councillor Aspin, you have a maximum of 5 minutes to say anything in reply.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just to thank Councillors Douglas and Doughty for their comments. To start with Councillor Douglas's remarks, certainly agree in terms of the financial limbo that all councils have been placed in and obviously will continue to be so, we suspect, even when we have seen the settlement next week. You've answered your own question in terms of when you will see the full budget information. When we get the final settlement from the government, we'll then obviously with confidence be able to publish the full budget proposals as soon as possible. The decision session for that, where the full budget proposals will be tabled, will be on the 19th of January. And obviously the papers will be announced in advance of that. And obviously the intention there is to give councillors, residents and businesses not just the opportunities at full council and at the executive and as part of the budget consultation that is running at the moment, but a much earlier opportunity through that decision session to engage with that. But it is frustrating that we need to wait and cross our fingers that the final settlement will be published by the government. They are known to slip them as well. I absolutely agree of the importance of crucial council services for those that most need them, and obviously the challenges of supporting people during the cost of living crisis and the cost of doing business crisis. And obviously that's why it was both reflected in my report and in my speech in terms of the additional funding that we are making available to the Household Support Fund, and also the discretionary funding that we're giving, because we know that that is more important, and obviously getting on and making sure that that support is what is really, really important, rather than sort of playing politics backwards and forwards with that issue, when we know some of the underlying problems there are nationally and are in terms of the level of government funding that are putting councils up and down the country into making some decisions that we would much rather not make, and obviously would rather put even further funding into those priority areas. I agree with the asylum seeker programme. Obviously, I welcomed the families that are coming into the city. It isn't always helpful in terms of the way the Home Office communicates. It certainly is not helpful that the Home Office does not give with that additional funding, whether that be further funding for health or schools or local authorities to provide the support that's needed. And I have written to the Home Office to that effect, as I know a lot of council leaders have done, to continue to make that point for them, so that we can both continue to offer that support. In terms of climate action, York Central draft transport plan, I welcome your comments in terms of highlighting a lot of the work that the administration is doing and is delivering on the ground. We heard only at the start of the meeting a lot of support for the climate action strategy, whether that be from the University of Leeds, York Minster, the local LEP, the University of York, or Forestry England, in terms of some of that work that is at the absolute cutting edge of what local authorities are doing ahead of the regional and national targets. And absolutely, this is a first go at a lot of these strategies. They'll evolve and obviously they'll grow over time, but that's the sort of stated level of ambition that we're working towards. And on York Central, I'm absolutely delighted that you've highlighted the opportunity that that gives us in terms of bringing new jobs to the city. Very pleased a number of months ago now to secure the commitment from the government, and in particular the Cabinet Office, to placing new jobs in the city. And as you say, the opportunity with the government hub there to both get new jobs and also secure the long-term future of other jobs in the city. One thing we absolutely didn't want is any jobs, for example, that were at Fulford Road Barracks to go elsewhere with the decisions that the government have made on that. So it's really important to both keep jobs and get new jobs. And I'm currently working with the Government Property Agency, Homes England and Network Rail to push and hope that early next year there'll be further announcements regards the government hub and potential planning processes that will really unlock further some of those opportunities that York Central gives the city. To Councillor Doughty, and the main point I'll pick up from your comments is regards to devolution. I'll ignore some of your other comments on that point. And I'm sure you will be aware that the process that we are following and the constraints of the consultation is directed by the government. And obviously, I'm sure you've had lots of conversations with your MPs and your ministers to unlock that and give local authorities perhaps more choice and more flexibility in terms of how we would approach the devolution conversation. Unfortunately, the deal and the offer that we have on the table is the deal and the offer that the government will give us, and the way that we are consulting it is the way that the government will allow us to consult on the scheme to meet the criteria. We had that debate in the council that on balance, in terms of the funding and advantages that it would give you.
That's 5 minutes, Councillor Aspen, I'm afraid.
It's worth it, but it's your government that prescribes the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aspen. Now, I invite members to question the leader on his report. The council procedure rules allow 10 minutes for questions, a total of 10 minutes for questions and comments. The leader may respond directly to any question asked or comment made, or may agree to submit a written answer if unable to respond in detail. That response will be circulated to all council members within 5 working days. May I just remind members that supplementary questions or comments are limited for each question or comment to 1 from the original questioner and a total of 2 more, being 1 from one member and 1 more from another, if that's clear. That's rule B7. Now, questions, members. Councillor Webb, I believe you're first.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It was pleasing to see partners join the council to discuss the cost of living crisis recently. Can the leader detail any of his new actions or commitments to the city resulting from this summit? Not redistributing government grants. What actions has the administration actually taken?
Thank you very much, Councillor Webb. I was just checking with Councillor Eyre. As you rightly say, the cost of living summit was held and had really positive engagement across parties, partners and MPs in the city. And that was a really important way of bringing people together to discuss what more can be done. We have had an update report on the cost of living summit and the actions coming out of it to executive, which I'm very happy to share. And obviously that indicates the direction of travel in terms of some of the things that the council has done. But you're absolutely right that obviously more can be done, and very happy to discuss that with you and with officers. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question was, what have you actually done? I mean, there's an unfortunate thing here where you're seeking to mislead the public by passing off government support funding as that of your administration. What has this administration done?
Sorry, Councillor Aspin.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So obviously, some of the examples I discussed in my speech and in my report in terms of the household support fund and also the discretionary scheme that have been rolled out are just two examples that we are delivering. But I will send that report to you that outlines the feedback and the further actions from the cost of living summit. If you have any particular suggestions for things that you think we should do or that we can do within the financial envelope that either we have or that the government can give us, very happy to look at them. Just drop me a line outside of the meeting. Thank you.
Supplementary.
May I ask if members want to place another supplementary question on that particular topic? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. The Household Support Fund, I believe, is a government scheme. I think the word you may be looking for is nothing.
Councillor Aspin.
I'm afraid I didn't quite catch it. I think you're saying that that part of the funding is from government, which obviously lots of the funding from the council is from government for a whole variety of schemes and projects. And we need to utilise that funding and obviously do what the council can do to top that up or enhance it. But same answer that I gave to Councillor Webb, if you have any particular suggestions, presumably if you do, you'd have already been in contact, but please do get in touch with them. Thank you.
Any more supplementaries on that particular one? No? Okay, let's move on to the next question then. It is Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just on the topic of devolution, could the leader please update us on the work of the Joint Devolution Committee, which I understand recently held its first meeting?
Councillor Aspin.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. As you say, Councillor Fenton, we had the first Joint Devolution Committee amongst ourselves and North Yorkshire County Council recently, joined by colleagues from both the LEP and also the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner for the area. That was an important step forward on that journey, and it was important to have that first meeting, not to preempt the decision that this council will need to make early next year, but primarily to make sure that we're in a position to access the government funding that has been offered early, and particularly that will help with housing and also with transport. Subject to the council making a decision early next year, there would then be a second meeting of the joint committee, likely in February or March, that would then progress that into becoming a shadow combined authority, if you will, in order to be in a position to make sure we capitalise on the funding and schemes that the government are offering.
Thank you, Councillor Aspin. Councillor Fenton, do you have a supplementary on that? Does anyone else have a supplementary on that? I think you were first, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to just ask the leader quite how he's going to face the challenge of spending that money that was within the report that went through the joint committee. I understand that we've got 2.6 million to spend on brownfield sites by 2025, I believe. I just wonder if you've come up with any creative ideas of finding partners yet to actually make sure that we do benefit from that money. Thank you.
Councillor Aspin.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Douglas, for that question. One of the things that we discussed at the meeting was exactly the point that you're making, that it is a really ambitious timescale to meet the criteria to pull down that funding. There has been a call that has been sent out already for projects and proposals to come forward as part of that process. Many of the projects, either our officers, North Yorkshire officers or the LEP are already aware of, but any help to make sure that the wider community knows that that's there and an opportunity to get involved and bring forward those projects is obviously the process that we want to take place over the coming weeks to make sure that we are in a position to make sure that we can capitalise from that funding.
Thank you, Councillor Aspin. Councillor Waters, I think you were next.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Of course, the meeting of the Joint Committee preempts and makes the consultation look the sham that it is. I was particularly drawn to your remarks in the second paragraph of your report on this devolution, when you talked of reviewing feedback and considering whether to agree the deal. So I'd just like to ask you to clearly outline what levels of adverse reaction in the consultation would lead to the deal not progressing.
Thank you.
Aspin, yes, sorry.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So the first point I would make is that obviously the results of the consultation, as I said, have to go back to executive, but then ultimately are coming here to full council. And therefore, every single councillor is going to have an opportunity to consider the consultation results and make their own judgment as to whether that is a proposal that we want to ultimately submit to government. And obviously that's a consideration you will be able to make, and you'll be able to consider that response and what level you feel is appropriate. And from what I hear so far, the consultation responses are more positive than they are not in terms of going forward with the devolution deal. And the most commented part that has been, if you would like to call critical, has been the prospect of the new mayor and combined authority potentially having future tax raising or business rate powers. Not that any mayor in the country has taken up that opportunity, but that has generated the most discussion. But they are the types of points that we'll get to consider when we look at that paper in the new year, and it will be for every individual councillor to consider it.
Thank you, Councillor Aspin. I think we've exhausted all the supplementaries on that. So the next substantive question is again from Mr. Waters. Councillor Waters, I beg your pardon.
I'll decline the opportunities because I managed to fit it in with that supplementary. Thank you.
Very well then. Our next questioner is Councillor Douglas, and we are 8 minutes through the 10 minutes, Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is about prioritisation of resources. It's quite clear that the council will not be coming in on budget at the end of this year without plundering reserves, with 3 million already earmarked for that purpose. What decisions, Leader, do you intend to take in year to stabilise the council's finances so it's not at risk of going bust next year? Thank you.
Councillor Aspin.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. This is obviously a point that rightly has been reported on through various financial and capital monitors that have come through to the council executive, not just this year, in previous years. It's obviously been very important to take in-year action. So, for example, a recruitment freeze for non-essential posts, and obviously stopping non-essential spend where services can, to make sure that the council can come in on budget and that there aren't particular pressures. Obviously, where we are particularly seeing those pressures are in adult social care and children's social care, which is not just York, but obviously is a national issue. And then that feeds into those wider conversations about next year's budget, and of course looking forward to the future in terms of what we can do. But we will do everything we can do that obviously doesn't impact on crucial services or those frontline services that residents expect to see, whilst grappling with those challenges with the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspin. We have about 40 seconds left. Supplementary, Councillor Douglas.
So what are you going to cut then, Councillor Aspin, in that case?
So obviously I've given you the answer to this question multiple times now, which is that the decision, I can't tell you until the government publishes its settlement, because you cannot make decisions on the budget without full awareness of what you've got in year. That's a different question.
No, she said what.
So in terms of in year, I gave you 2 examples in my response. And obviously we will continue to do things like that and everything we can do, but you cannot obviously impact on services that residents most expect to see. And as I highlighted, those cost pressures are primarily in adults and children's services, which I'm sure you would agree with me about the importance of
That's
those.
the 10 minutes, I'm afraid, Councillor Aspen. Thank you very much for those questions and indeed Councillor Aspen's responses. I will now invite Councillor Aspen to move the recommendations of the Executive to Council from the Executive meeting of the 22nd of November as contained in the minutes at pages 27 to 32 of the Council papers, and also the Executive meeting held earlier today as contained in the minutes circulated around the room this evening. These latter relate to the 10-year strategies at minute 57, the pavement cafe licence update at minute 58, the capital programme monitor at minute 59, and York 2032, the 10-year plan at minute 71. Do you wish to move, Councillor Aspen?
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm happy to move all 4 executive minutes as set out in the agenda, but I would like to particularly briefly highlight the York 2032 strategy framework for the city, comprised of a city vision and 3 interrelated strategies: climate change, health and well-being, and economic. York 2032 sets out the key priorities, ambitions, and targets for the city over the decade ahead. The strategy is a result of an extensive 18-month programme of engagement, which included our big conversation, stakeholder roundtable workshops, scrutiny meetings, focus groups, and sessions in Explore York. The engagement sought to find out from residents, businesses, and communities what they want York to look like in 10 years, focusing on 3 major strategic challenges: reaching net zero by 2030, strengthening the economy post-COVID, and improving the health and well-being of all residents. I'd like to thank all of those that took time to share their views and thoughts. The 3 strategies lay out aspirations and a vision for the city in the coming years that York will be a vibrant, prosperous, welcoming, and sustainable city where everyone can share and take pride in its success. My colleagues will speak in more detail about the importance and ambitions within these strategies, but we have already heard, for example, from city partners on this and the vision that it sets out for the city. With the challenges we are all facing with the cost of living crisis, now more than ever, we need certainty about the direction of the future to help us tackle those local challenges and, of course, make the best use of York's opportunities. These strategies provide us with the path towards our goals, and now our priority is to deliver them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen. Do we have a seconder for the recommendations?
Yes,
Councillor
Chair.
de Gorne.
I'd like to formally second the proposal, but acknowledge that this is a really important point in time that these strategies, as has been outlined, have been subject to significant consultation and work with the partners, some of whom you've heard earlier on, and it's really important that we adopt them, acknowledging that we can always improve on things, but we need to get on with delivering these strategies in tandem for the benefit of the city and our achievement of zero carbon by 2030.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorne. I now invite debate on the recommendations. Please indicate by raising your hand if you wish to speak and state which recommendation or recommendations you wish to speak upon. Let me remind members that there is no overall time limit for this section, but each member has up to 3 minutes to speak. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Lord Mayor, rather. I'll be speaking on minute 57 and minute 71, the 10-year strategies and the 10-year plan. Collaboratively, that's a good word, isn't it? And it was mentioned numerous times by the public about how these plans and strategies have been brought together, mentioned on a number of occasions. This plan and the associated strategies are hugely important for the city, a commitment for the city for 10 years A city with a plan will attract investment, so one of the speakers keeps telling us. Civic society and those who volunteered have been included in developing the strategies and the plans. And I think the biggest group of people who haven't been involved in developing the plans are those that sit in the chamber here, particularly on the opposition and the smaller parties groups. So for the 10-year plan, this week was the first time that I had seen that. It's got so much in there that will affect our city over the coming years. And why were we not included in that? That this would be a prime opportunity for cross-party work. I find it tremendously disappointing. It goes against democracy as well. When you include the people that come forward, that volunteer, civic society, that is a section of our population that are keen to participate. We have many people across the city who don't come forward and volunteer themselves, but members in this chamber are democratically elected by them and can therefore represent their viewpoints. The Labour group will be abstaining on both the 10-year strategies and the 10-year plan for this reason. We can't vote for something we've not seen before the executive papers came out this week. We'd like to request cross-party work, all member involvement, engage with your council properly and all our city's residents, and then we request that it comes back to us. We want to participate and we've not been given the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. We have the next speaker is Councillor Widdowson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to talk on the strategies. So over the last 3 years, we've worked very hard to understand where we are and what we can do to help mitigate the climate crisis. The strategy and action plan in front of us is another major step forward of our shared ambition to reducing the city's carbon emissions and making York cleaner and greener. In March 2019, the city declared a climate emergency, carried unanimously at full council. Following this, the work started when we engaged with the UK's leading authority in this area, Professor Andy Goulson of the University of Leeds, who you heard from earlier this evening. By January 2020, we had a scientific report of where York was with regard to its carbon footprint and emissions. The task was then to develop a plan on how we could meet the targets set out by the Paris Agreement. In February 2020, we recruited our head of carbon reduction, and over the next few months, the teams leading on this work grew significantly. Their commitment has been at the heart of the work ever since. As an administration, we have invested and prioritised this work to investigate the best approach to address the challenges and opportunities set out in the Zero Carbon Roadmap. From how we use our buildings to fleet operation, procurement processes, training, and so forth, and how we can increase the pace of effective delivery. It's worth noting that the council is responsible for 4% of the city's carbon footprint, but our influence is much larger. 12 months ago, we developed a strong rolling action plan. Today, it stands at 160 actions, 59 of which are in progress. And to name a few, it includes delivery of the new community woodland, 50,000 trees this winter, eventually increasing to 210,000 trees in the 195 acres. That's one tree for every resident in the city. Delivery of the largest and most accessible EV charging facilities outside of London. The largest regional electric park and ride fleet. Delivery of better flood protection for 3,000 homes. A retrofit action plan for council-owned homes. And a pilot of solar lights that's in Hall Road Park. To deliver these actions, we've sought to understand and work with a multitude of experts and across the city and regional partners, including the university, businesses, leading employers and organisations in the city, as well as our residents. I think we all agree that the task ahead of us is challenging, but we also recognise that we must work together to deliver actions and the ambitions stated in the strategy for the benefit of our city and generations to come. If we can deliver what we now know is possible for York, and we're now recognised as a leader in climate action, We can not only do our bit for the planet, but also bring people out of fuel poverty, create new jobs, new habitats, better leisure facilities, better health, and an increasingly robust economy throughout the city. So I'm delighted to support this strategy and congratulate the team on their hard work, knowing that we have even more hard work ahead to deliver this ambitious plan.
Thank you, Councillor Widdowson. The next speaker on my list is Councillor Taylor.
Well, thank you, Lord Mayor. Regarding the 10-year strategies and the 10-year plan, listening to the 7 public speakers from the organisations, they sound fantastic. But I'm afraid I haven't had a chance to read those appendices either. And so, like our friends in the Labour Party, I shall have to abstain on those matters. I would like to speak about the pavement licence cafe updates. The recommended decision there, I think, is entirely sensible. We do have to protect the access for disabled and elderly people. But that doesn't mean that the issue isn't problematic. And as we heard from the gentleman who spoke from the bid, this could potentially put some of our cafes and licensed establishments out of business if they're unable to trade in the way that they have been able to do so since the early days of the pandemic. I would remind members of a plan called Reinvigorate York, which I think dates back to about 2012, 2013, which was reports brought to us by Sir Ron Cook. And one of those proposals was to level Fossgate, the road, with the pavements and remove the curbs, which would make it entirely a great deal safer for most either disabled or elderly people, or simply tourists who are looking about and fall over the pavement. And that would resolve the matter in one street at least. But of course, it's capital expenditure, which we might not be able to reach at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Our next speaker is Councillor Craghill. Councillor Craghill.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to speak on the 10-year strategies. I really want to welcome that we now have these strategies in front of us today. As Greens on the executive, we have worked very hard to reach this point, particularly regarding the climate change strategy. And we would like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that officers have put into this. Alongside the accompanying climate change action plan, this provides a very firm foundation to support the council, city partners and anchor institutions and residents to work together to achieve our climate goals over the coming years. The strategy and action plan may not be perfect, but it is clearly good enough for York to have been awarded an A rating for climate change leadership, one of only 122 cities worldwide to be awarded an A by the Carbon Disclosure Project, something we should all be really celebrating. Looking for perfect can be the enemy of the good and the possible, and what we need to do now is to get on with this. The action plan is a living document which will be reviewed, updated and added to each year. The 160 actions include a lot we are already getting on with, others that will be underway soon, and some that will need some difficult choices, more financial investment, innovation, and working together to deliver. Collaboration is a good thing. The strategy commits to finding ways to reduce the city's carbon emissions to zero with a minimal use of local offsetting as a last resort. As Greens, we would prefer no offsetting, and as the city progresses along the pathway to 2030, we will continue to work for 100% local zero carbon with no offsetting, alongside the gradual inclusion of so-called Scope 3 emissions in the plan, the reduction of the emissions we create from the goods and services we buy and consume outside of York. We welcome the recognition that there are major dependencies between the 3 strategies, We know that investing in the actions we need to deliver our zero carbon targets will also help us deliver warmer, more comfortable homes, lower energy bills and healthier communities that will reduce the demands on our beleaguered health service. It will also create thousands of new jobs, green jobs in the local and regional economy, and that is quite rightly a key priority in the economic strategy. I think the very recent COP27 underlines that governments around the world are still dragging their feet on climate change and only underlines the need for local action. The same applies to creating strong local economies. So I do hope in that context that we will all get behind the climate change strategy and the other interdependent strategies presented to us here. It does need everyone to get involved.
Thank you, Councillor Craghill, and that was dead on 3 minutes. Our next speaker is Councillor Mason.
Sorry, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to briefly address the Pavement Cafe licensing update, which is minute 58. I'd like to begin by thanking all those who've contributed to this review, including residents with lived experience of the obstacles caused by the current deregulated licensing regime. During the early stages of the pandemic, the deregulated licensing system gave the ability to swiftly award cafe pavement licenses without making planning applications and enabled many businesses to continue trading during what was an incredibly challenging time. Whilst the pandemic and the emergency measures under which the city and businesses operated might be over, this is not to say that businesses don't face serious challenges now, which they clearly do, from supply chain issues all the way through to rising bills. However, it's clear that the deregulated system is not entirely fit for its current operation for our city centre. As we leave the pandemic and look towards the future, we have to take account of what has worked and what hasn't, and what did during those exceptional times. It's very clear that there's been access issues caused by pavement cafes, particularly those blocking footways. This has been highlighted in the Access Consultants report. We remain committed to the long-term vision of the city centre, with an outdoor cafe culture playing a key part of the success of our economy. However, the current city centre infrastructure cannot support the way the system operated during the pandemic. The recommendations approved by the executive set out in the report would address the access issues the deregulated system posed and set in place a long-term approach to awarding cafe licenses that would not negatively impact on access around our foot streets. Beyond the impacts of the COVID pavement cafe regime, the report highlights the long-term challenge of improving drop curbs and pavements, something that is also reflected in the city centre access action plan. But further to a simple change in guidance, the recommendations would also strengthen the existing enforcement and ensure that the operation of the new regime is monitored through a regular panel group and communities in providing feedback on the lived experience of pavement cafes. I absolutely appreciate the direct impact this change in guidance would have for a considerable number of businesses. However, it's clear that York's narrow medieval streets were not designed with pavement cafes in mind. I think I've said pavement cafes and licenses a lot in that. The proposed change in guidance mostly reverts to principles which existed prior to COVID, whilst enabling qualifying businesses to gain licenses quicker and cheaper. Provision of a clear style and implementation guide, as well as training, will also support businesses to make the most of their outdoor pavement cafe. There are no easy solutions, but we must strike a balance that ensures the city centre is safe, thriving and accessible for all. I'd urge all councillors to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. And the next member on my list is Councillor Crawshaw. 3 minutes, Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and apologies, I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm feeling a little bit ropey, and that is my description of the 10-year strategies as well. Unfortunately, in 2019, we did pass a motion as a climate emergency. I'm afraid I'm still no clearer as to whether Councillor Widdowson thinks that we are aiming for carbon neutral as a city council or carbon neutral as a city as a whole by 2030. But in the 4 years that have passed since then, or we're getting on for 4 years, I don't see us having made any meaningful progress towards either of those two targets. Also in 2019, we passed a motion to remove non-essential private vehicle journeys from within the city walls and to have a transport strategy across the entire city, which would enable a reduction in non-essential journeys. That strategy was due to be in place by 2023, and I don't see any progress on that whatsoever either. And what actually surprises me about this is that I was approached as chair of Scrutiny to see whether we could do some work to try to support these 10-year strategies. Now that follows me actively asking since 2020 to be involved and having been battered off and battered off and battered off. And then in June of this year, I was suddenly asked to arrange a whole series of joint scrutinies, which included a transport strategy. And I was told that that was utterly essential part of these 4 strategies that were all codependent. So we dutifully arranged a series of meetings, only to find that the transport strategy didn't exist and the health and wellbeing strategy hadn't been developed. Ultimately, the sprinklers went off at West Officers. We cancelled all the meetings, and half an hour later, West Officers was back open again. We weren't able to reorganise those meetings within the time frame that was available. So it is not the case that Scrutiny has had any meaningful input in these strategies, with the exception of the Climate Scrutiny Committee, which has done its best to get meaningful targets into these strategies, which have clearly been omitted. Most recently, they tried very, very hard to get some recommendations around the desperate need for there to be transport within these strategies, and that was battered off as well. So I'm afraid that these strategies, it's not letting the perfect get in the way of the good enough. They are just simply not good enough. And that's the problem here. We can't be supporting something which is not good enough. We want to be ambitious as a city. We want to be working with everybody. The whole point of the motion that I brought in 2019 was to try to depoliticize some of this and actually find some common goals and grapple with some of those difficult questions that we have to ask and work together to produce something meaningful. And unfortunately, that just simply has not happened. Now, I know that a number of us attended the climate strikes that the children of this city undertook, as happened all around the world in 2019. And they were truly inspiring, led by Greta Thunberg.
Councillor Crawshaw, that's 3 minutes
Well,
on.
I'll just say, I think those young people listening to what they've heard this evening would echo her words, which is blah, blah.
I hate to stop you in full flow, Councillor Crawshaw, but we must try and maintain a programme. Thank you for that contribution. The next on my list is Councillor Daubney.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On minute 57, I should like to speak in support of the economic strategy in my role as Vice Chair of the Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee. I believe we all agree with the goal of the strategy for York being a place where productive businesses are good employers and where all the residents thrive, so the city considered among the top 25% of UK local economies in terms of productivity, pay and skills. York has a strong economy, but it also has a well-known deep-rooted challenges facing businesses and residents, particularly in the current context of post-COVID recovery and the cost of living crisis. This strategy sets out what we plan to do over the next 10 years to enable our people and our businesses to thrive while playing their full part in meeting our carbon net zero ambitions. It's very welcome to see the emphasis on developing green jobs, and a sustainable and fair economy underpins this strategy. York has a wealth of assets that mark our city as one of the leading economies in north of England. The opportunities of long-term projects such as York Central, Castle Gateway, York Station Frontage, Riverside Development, and the opportunities brought about by devolution, together with the potential for indigenous growth, should not be underestimated. We must build on our local strengths, recognizing the specific challenges facing the city. This is recognizing how deeply intertwined this economic strategy is with other two strategies and the joint challenges of climate change and health. The progress on the local plan, which is fast approaching its final phase, will also play an important role in supporting this strategy and our joint goals. The planning system is an important tool for economic development, and we must work with the system to ensure that businesses can thrive in York. Whilst COVID posed one of the biggest challenges to our economy and businesses, we must build on a pandemic response, particularly recognizing the micro business community This is the backbone of our economy in York and the opportunities our city provides for businesses to start and grow. Rooted in this local strategy is also the clear case for levelling up the norm, so we can all benefit from the region's full potential. York is already the most productive and well-paid city in Yorkshire, and yet we are at or below average when compared to the whole of the UK. The strategy has a clear pathway and ambitious set of goals towards making our city and its economy thrive. But the work in delivering on these goals will be the real challenge. The economic partnership will have the task in their hands, but this strategy gives them a clear and ambitious start. With that said, I urge colleagues to support the economic strategy. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Daubney. And our penultimate speaker is Councillor Vassy. Please, 3 minutes, Councillor Vassy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not hesitant in criticising when things go wrong, so let me also praise when things go right. I welcome the arrival of these 10-year strategies at full council. I'm pleased that the recommendations of the Climate Emergency Committee at its October meeting have been accepted and adopted in full by the executive. I applaud the cross-party work that has happened over 3 years by all the members of the Climate Change Committee. We've helped shape the strategy and the public consultations that have taken place. And thanks to officers for all the work. As Councillor Craghill says, this strategy is not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it's great that we're now joining cities that have a plan and are showing leadership. It's a decisive moment. We have a clearer understanding of the scale of the challenge. We're all grown-ups. We know the job isn't done, it's just beginning. Our new strategy recognises that we must cut emissions from transport by over 70% and from buildings by over 50% if we're to meet our climate goals. This is going to be extraordinarily difficult. Since 2000, carbon emissions in York have dropped on transport by about 0%. And we urgently need a local transport plan that is fit for purpose. I agree with that. We're making great strides in construction. New affordable housing built to passive house standards. I believe this building itself is now heated by renewable energy. These are good things. Let's also remember we have to retrofit 70,000 homes at probably a cost of 2 billion in this city. We're going to have to really apply ourselves to finding inward investment to make that happen and to create new jobs, to train new people. Given the number of days between now and 2030, we need to be retrofitting 20 homes a day, every day. Let's accept that huge challenge. At the risk of sounding like Craig on Strictly Come Dancing, I'm going to be a bit picky. We're all human, and we know it's hard to keep a laser focus on this. The example I would give you are the pavement cafe license plans that encourage the use of electric patio heaters. In France, patio heaters were banned 2 years ago, and now cafes and restaurants offer blankets to people when they sit outside. Going forwards, climate change must shape all our decisions. There can no longer be loopholes, especially when they'll benefit big business rather than the small businesses.
Councillor Vassy, that's 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
So I welcome all of this. I hope we'll work together going forwards because it is critical to our future.
Thank you, Councillor Vassy. And our final speaker on this is Councillor Runciman. Councillor Runciman, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to commend to Council a strategy which we've heard very little about tonight, but which is absolutely essential for not just the health of our city, but the well-being of our residents. The Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy is the result of the hard work of senior leaders in health and care across the city, clinicians, voluntary sector leaders, local authority directors, healthcare managers, and elected members. So firstly, I must thank them all for the time they've spent developing it. It recognises that we are already on a good footing and have many positive opportunities locally, but we still have health needs and challenges alongside some significant inequalities. There's a complex web of factors in society which contribute to good health: education, jobs, connection within the community, the impact of the pandemic, economic changes, healthcare services, and environmental sustainability. We won't change all these things overnight, but our strategy will guide our joint ambitions and goals to make York a healthier and fairer city. That's why it's important to view the health and well-being strategy alongside the other strategies, economic and environmental, both in this report. They all reinforce each other in supporting the work that's underway. The strategy is launched in a cost of living crisis affecting our residents and the health system. We are more than 2 years into a global pandemic, which has had a deep impact on the health of our city and the health system, and whose effects are still with us. These challenges are also set in the context of national reforms to the health and care system and the continuing challenges facing the NHS across the country after decades of underfunding. And the nurses going on strike epitomise that. It shows the need for a clear goal-driven strategy to underpin our efforts locally during this very challenging time. It is written in the light of all this and with recovery in mind. One main goal is to reduce the gap in life expectancy between the richest and poorest communities in York. We need to reduce anxiety scores, increase happiness scores, reduce smoking and alcohol consumption rates, reduce the suicide rate and the self-harm rate, improve diagnosis gaps and reduce loneliness. And in the long term, all these can be achieved. The Health and Wellbeing Board will now work to develop 2 key documents: an outcomes framework and an action plan.
Councillor Runciman, I'm going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid.
I believe this strategy sets an ambitious and clear goal-driven approach to tackling health inequalities here in York and to make our city healthier and fairer. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Runciman. That completes all the speakers. Councillor Aspen, do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to thank all of the speakers and those that contributed to the debate. A few particular points. The first one, as we have heard, there has been extensive work and consultation on the 10-year strategies, health and wellbeing, climate and economy, including scrutiny over very many months, partnership boards, and of course our big conversation with thousands of residents taking part in one of the biggest consultations the council has run. And secondly, on the 10-year plan, a briefing was offered to opposition leaders in November with a copy of the draft plan, and only one opposition group took this up. Obviously, that's extremely disappointing given what we've heard tonight. Thirdly, just like to thank all of the councillors, Councillor Vassie, Daubney, Craggill, Tagorn and Douglas, for setting out the importance of having the strategies in place and of setting those ambitions that we have as a city and the importance of collaborative work towards them. We must make sure that York is in a position to capitalise on any future opportunities, in particular those funding opportunities that might come along. So I hope all councillors will support the raft of strategies and documents in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aspen. We're now going to move to a vote on each of the 4 recommendations, following which I suggest it would be opportune to have a break. So let's go to the vote then. Let me just say that voting at this meeting will be by a show of hands, unless otherwise indicated. Please raise your hands when I ask in a moment to indicate whether you wish to vote for, against, or abstain in relation to each recommendation. Can I ask you please to keep your hands raised for long enough to allow officers to complete the count? So the first one is all those wishing to vote for the recommendation in respect of the 10-year strategies at minute 57, please raise your hands now. Thank you. All those wishing to vote against that recommendation, please raise. Okay. And those wishing to abstain, please show. There we are. Okay, the result is 22 for, no vote against, and 17 abstentions. That recommendation is therefore carried. Second one is the pavement cafe license update at minute 58. Those wishing to vote for that recommendation, please raise your hands now.
That's unanimous, Chair.
That seems to be unanimous. Thank you, members. Third one is those wishing to vote for the recommendation in respect of the capital programme monitor at minute 59. Please.
Sorry, point of order, Lord Mayor, you didn't complete the vote. Not everybody had a vote in that on minute 58. Councillor Vassie didn't vote.
I'm sorry, did I miss an abstention or a vote against?
I assumed it was unanimous, Lord Mayor, but actually.
That's right, it would then be.
Right.
Can we just check that he's abstaining?
Okay. Are you, Councillor Vassie, are you abstaining? Thank you. I'll rerun that result then. So
38 in favour and 1 abstention.
So the result of that recommendation vote was 38 in favour, 1 abstention. My apologies for missing you, Councillor Vassie.
Still carried.
The third recommendation is in respect of the capital programme monitor at minute 59. Those wishing to vote for that, please raise your hands now.
Yep, that's fine. We've got the one that's
Unanimous.
That's 38 for the first vote.
Okay. Those, let me just run through that. Those against? Those abstaining? Right, let's get it right. Okay, so that's 38 for, 1 abstention. The recommendation is therefore carried. And the final one is in respect of the York 2032, the 10-year plan at minute 71 of today's meeting, the 15th of December executive meeting. Those in favour, please raise. Okay. Those against? And those wishing to abstain, please.
So that's again, that is 22 for, none against.
Okay. The result of that vote is 22 for, no one against, and 17 abstentions. That recommendation is therefore carried. And with that, we conclude the executive recommendations. Can I suggest therefore that we now break for 15 minutes and we return to discuss the report of the Deputy Leader and various other items of business. Thank you very much indeed. Are we all seated? Just to remind members, we have a little less than 1 hour, 45 minutes of the meeting left. So let's resume at item 7 of the agenda, which is the report of the Deputy Leader and questions. Deputy Leader, Councillor de Gorn, would you wish to formally move your report?
Thank you. I will formally move it. Just point out, it's obviously light on transport, and that's on account of those items being covered under item 10 on page 39. So.
Thank you very much indeed. I now invite members to question the Deputy Leader on his report. As before, the Council procedure rules allow 10 minutes, a total of 10 minutes for questions and comments to the Deputy Leader. Deputy Leader may respond directly to any question asked or comment made, or he may agree to submit a written answer if unable to respond to the detail. That written answer will be circulated to all Council members within 5 working days. Let me remind you also about supplementary questions or comments. These are limited for each question or comment to 1 from the original questioner and a total of 2 more, being 1 from 1 member and 1 more from another. And that is citing Rule B8. So, questions, members? Councillor Oral, I think, is first.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Could the Deputy Leader update members on the work in the city to support those struggling the most this winter? Is there any progress on the Warm Spaces initiative?
Thank you.
Councillor de Gorn.
Certainly the warm space is an important initiative. And as members will be aware, a number of places such as Explore libraries and community centres are offering that facility, and are very much welcome any other organisations or points of contact which could be added to that list. In terms of the cost of living crisis, I think it's important. I have here, I don't know how many members have actually seen this leaflet, but nevertheless 10,000 copies of this leaflet have been produced to provide information to residents and those working with them about the important options available to find out more about sources of funding which they can access. And if you haven't actually, I think it would be useful just to mention that there is this leaflet is available on the website, foodaidnetwork.org.uk, or also on worryingaboutmoney.co.uk/York. And that gives a range of organisations at contact points that people can get benefits and financial support advice from. I'd also just say that we do work with other organisations through the Financial Inclusion Steering Group. There's work on promoting the council schemes, including the York Financial Assistance Scheme, many different ways in which residents can get that support at this difficult time when the cost of living crisis, not least obviously the energy increases, dramatic increases in cost of energy that people are facing, and the support that they might choose to get. So everything down to even small things like the York Energy Advice Service and housing staff, the handy person service, providing sort of draft proofing and sort of very low cost ways of improving comfort and trying to tackle that problem.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. Any supplementary?
Supplementary, Lord Mayor. Just thank Councillor de Gorn for that and all the people who are providing these facilities across the city.
Okay.
It's very important this year.
Thank you very much. Are there any supplementary questions or comments on that particular aspect? Okay, let's move on then to the next questioner, who is Councillor Hook, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Could the deputy leader update members on the Riverside Path consultation as part of the York Central plans?
Councillor de Gorn.
Yes, that is unfortunately the one of the ward councillors who's been chief protagonist on this is not here tonight, but nevertheless, it is an important connection for. Oh, okay. Well, at least one of them is here. Yeah. The important connection that is provided for people to walk and cycle from an area of the city into the city centre. And I'm aware that obviously it's a sensitive issue in terms of the impact of the stopping up of Lehman Road. This does provide that alternative for many people. It is something which at the moment there is a consultation underway, inviting residents to comment on their priorities. And I'm aware that although we do have capital funding available to spend on that, it probably won't cover everything that we might choose to do there. So obviously we're trying to reduce the numbers of occasions when that route is flooded is one of them. Widening it to provide space for cyclists and pedestrians to be separated as another. The use of CCTV has been suggested in terms of concerns about vulnerability to crime, and also the lighting on there are all things which are being looked at as part of that work. So when the consultation feedback has been compiled, there will be a further report to make decisions about what that money, that capital spending is spent on. And plans to take that forward during the course of next year.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. Councillor Hook, do you have any supplementary, any others? Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, the improvements to Riverside Path between Scarborough Bridge and Jubilee Terrace have been needed for a long time. And as you say, they are now more urgent in light of the administration's plans to permanently close Lehman Road and cut off that walking and cycling access. We've been told that the necessary improvements will cost well over £1 million, but only about £500,000 has been allocated. You did say in your report that the plans are funded through the council's capital programme. So can we take that as a commitment to fully fund the required improvements? I'm a little concerned about what you're just saying about priorities. All of the improvements are completely necessary. There's no point in having a path that's, you know, feels safe but is flooded, or a path that doesn't flood but doesn't feel safe or doesn't have the capacity for pedestrians and cyclists. So where's the funding going to come from?
Well, certainly, I would share your concern. I think it's important though that we do understand the priorities from the perspective of local residents, given the constraints that we have on the budget at this time. And I would say that your leader this morning at executive was raising questions about how we reduce the capital programme, not increase it. And, you know, these are the difficult choices that as an administration we have to make to try and minimise the revenue impact of capital programmes. But you know, we need to spend that capital money for a long-term investment in the future of this city. And so, you know, it may well be that, you know, as an example, that particular route I'm quite well familiar with, it does ice up. We have to spend money on making sure that it's gritted and safe to use at different times of the year, and raising the level and widening it could enhance the safety of that route, and that then reduces the impact on the city, on residents, and on our NHS health services. But we do need to make those long-term investments in the capital programme in order to deliver these sorts of improvements.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. Any more supplementaries? I think Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you. It can just be a very brief yes, no, please, Councillor de Gorn. The money might be made available. We, as you know, had £230,000 for public realm improvement in Micklegate and Bishop Hill that was rolled over for 3 years. And then you recently removed that from the budget, and that programme won't be delivered due to there having been no officer time allocated to actually spend the money. So can you just give a guarantee to the ward councillors in Holgate that any monies that are in the budget for these riverside improvements will actually come with dedicated officer time to actually be able to deliver whatever scheme is worked up, or indeed work up a scheme?
Councillor Gore.
Well, I believe the budget for next year will obviously be subject to this full council meeting, making decisions in February. With the reference that you made to something which is not here in the paper, but nevertheless, I would say that funding has not been removed. It is maybe identified in a different way to fulfil the express wishes of the ward's councillors to have a more holistic approach to the whole provision within the area that you're referring to. So, you know, we do respond to the views of ward councillors and try and work with ward councillors on whatever schemes are in their areas.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. I think that finishes that aspect. Can I now move to Councillor Pavlovich, please?
Thank you. I asked this question this morning at exec, or made the point. In respect to the passive house homes, had you had these homes built to building regs, which are still very energy efficient, how many more affordable houses could you have delivered?
Councillor de Gorn, you've got about 15 seconds really to answer that, please.
I'm afraid I don't have that answer. It's not my portfolio area in any case, but I don't have that information to hand. Obviously, there are political choices, and this programme is the one which has been adopted several years ago and is now in the process of being delivered. So it's rather a hypothetical question.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorn. That concludes the questions. So let us now move on to the urgent business item 13, which replaces item 8. As I mentioned earlier, this is the report of the monitoring officer in respect of members' allowances. So I will therefore invite the monitoring officer, Bryn Roberts, to introduce the report. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If I may, members, I'll begin by repeating the apology that I circulated on the 8th of December for the late dispensation of the report. Due to human error, it wasn't included on the agenda when it should have been. We take full responsibility for that. It was circulated as soon as we were alerted to the omission, but I'd like to repeat the apology to all members in public. I'll also have to confirm that because all members have a pecuniary interest as a result of the report, there is a general dispensation in effect which allows all members to take part in the vote. That is a delegated authority to myself in following appropriate consultation. So by way of some background to this, in 2019, the Independent Remuneration Panel conducted its overall review. It does so every 4 years. It came up with a basic allowance of £10,371 and then concluded the special responsibility allowances would be paid as a percentage of that basic allowance. Members will be aware that in 2020 and 2021, they received uplifts in accordance with the Constitution, those uplifts being 2.75% and 1.75% respectively. It's fair to say that the Constitution anticipated, as did the IRP report, that members' allowances would keep pace with the pay awards made to officers. And equally, they anticipated that those officer pay awards would simply be a percentage salary increase each year. This year, however, the pay award for officers has come in the way of a lump sum plus a small percentage increase to their allowances, which has caused something of a dilemma because it does not fit with either the IRP's previous adopted position or
in relation to the constitutional power to simply apply the percentage uplift that staff might get. That therefore leads us to the position that we're in today, where members are being asked to consider 3 options, each of which is based on a different calculation formula. So those options are option 1, to apply the 4.04% uplift to their basic and special responsibility allowances. That 4.04% is the same as the increase to officer allowances. The second option is to uplift members' basic allowances by £673. That figure has been arrived at by taking the overall figure that officers are being granted as a single uplift of £1,925 and applying the calculation methodology that the IRP used in 2019 to determine the basic allowance. On top of that, there would then be a 4.04% uplift to special responsibility allowances. Option 3 is then to have no uplift and to freeze the allowances at their current rates. In relation to this, I have comments from the chair of the Independent Remuneration Panel, which I will read to. I've circulated to all members already, but I will read out for the meeting. So David Dixon, the chair of the IRP, states, in 2019, the Independent Remuneration Panel recommended that until it met again in 2023, the members' basic and special responsibility allowances in the intervening years should increase in line with the National Joint Council Pay Award for local government employees. The panel, consisting of Elizabeth Heaps, Andrew Scott and David Dixon, also noted that this principle was applied in 2020 and 2021 when awards of 2.75% and 1.75% were approved. We note that for 2022, the National Joint Pay Award included both a 4.04% increase and a flat rate band of 1,925, an unusual combination which was not considered as part of our recommendations in previous recommendations by the IRP. We have reviewed the draft paper for presentation on 15th of December 2022 and would make the following observations. 1, we would not be in favour of no uplift, as this goes against our view that annual increases should be made rather than adjustments every 4 years. 2, we would support the transparent uplift of 4.04%, which is the general uplift recommended by the National Joint Council Pay Awards body, noting that we are planning to meet in May 2023 where we can, as is our practice, take soundings from all parties and review reward structures from equivalent bodies. So with that, it is now open to members to debate which option they would consider to be the most appropriate under the circumstances. Officers can justify each one of those different options by different calculation methodologies. It is now over to members, Chair, to debate the issue, and then we will take a vote on each separate option.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer, for that information. So, as the Monitoring Officer has said, I now invite debate on the report, and I'll try and take a cross-section of all parties and groups on this council. I'll start with Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking on behalf of the Labour Group in support of option 1, an increase of 4.04% in both the councillor basic allowance and special responsibility allowances. This is a very difficult decision at a time when rising costs for everyone, residents and the council are at the front of our minds. Our conclusion is that option 1 provides an appropriate balance, a balance between maintaining council's ability to attract the broadest cross-section of our resident population to consider being and be councillors, and the fact that the public is facing a cost of living crisis and council services are being cut to the bone to try and balance the budget. We mustn't lose sight of the fact our elected council members need to be properly representative of our communities. Younger and older, men and women, working, not working, caring, retired, studying, all ethnic backgrounds and religious beliefs, LGBT, disabled and able-bodied. I challenge you to look around you. There isn't enough diversity in this chamber. Paying a reasonable allowance rate that attempts to keep pace with rising costs is an important way of encouraging those who wouldn't otherwise have the financial means to participate. Councillors themselves are not immune to the cost of living crisis. We shouldn't imply through our stance on council allowances that we are all financially comfortable individuals, or that we are not worth the allowances paid to us. We will all be worse off this year than last year, given this figure falls well below inflation, and lower income councillors will continue to struggle should we take this 6% real terms drop in the allowance. Labour's position will always be to support workers and their work through fair pay, ensuring they are paid properly for the work they do. Although we as councillors are not classed as workers, the vast majority of us, I'm sure, put in the many hours that means we see this role as a job, and an important one that adds value to our residents and communities. We need to be confident in ourselves and the roles we fulfil and see it within the bigger picture of representative democracy. Where would our democracy be without people willing to become councillors and to represent their communities? The alternative is we take the Conservatives' likely position and take a step back to a time when democracy, and I use the term very loosely, was the preserve of only those with the time and wealth. A former Conservative council leader only a few years ago stood up and made the exact same point, that this was something to avoid. But our stance on this should not flip simply on the basis of our being in power or opposition or our proximity to an election. It's far too important for that. I urge you to support option 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Doughty, you wish to speak.
Firstly, thank you, Lord Mayor, for seeing, as I requested, this item on members' pay increases, which have been conveniently missed from the original published full council agenda, and then later tucked in as a late business item, which most certainly have slipped media and public attention, is at least heard at the meeting tonight, ahead of the political posturing that so often makes up the bulk of motions. I'm sure some councillors from the current Lib Dem-led administration, and possibly others in this chamber, would have preferred it to remain where it was, so that they could have eagerly voted it through under the public radar without debate. When the matter was proposed to group leaders last month, I was in shock and disbelief that there was any contemplation of testing the waters to check on appetite for yet another councillor hike in councillor so-called allowances, even coming with a suggestion it could be sorted quickly, that it could be in December pay. What a very nice Christmas bonus that would have been for some, a rubbing the noses of our residents in it, with the irony that the council leader just the day before claiming the council faced a huge council budget shortfall, and indeed spoke of the financial pressures on the city and our residents in his report again tonight. I shouldn't have been surprised at anything this administration does. Who could forget they awarded themselves the inflation busting increases last time, between 20 and 50%, depending on allowances, just months after the last local elections. York Conservatives didn't take the increase then, and we won't be now. It's with typical inefficiency that this council administration had not even approached the independent remuneration panel for an update this time to include in an actual published report. Instead, we received a last-minute brief email to councillors just today, seemingly hastily arranged an attempt at disguising complete incompetence. Some might be simply happy to stick with a dated formula from 2019, when the city's and world financial picture looked very different. Looking at statutory guidance, it suggested councils are required to maintain an independent remuneration panel. Not much, or indeed any evidence of much maintenance. I guess some will also seek a reinstatement of the panel directly after the next mayor local elections to see how much more they can get then too. Perhaps some need reminding that being a councillor is not a job. You are free to have careers, and that a large part of being one is because you want to do something good for your local community, not fleece them at any given opportunity. On this basis, and with my conscience intact, I can and will only vote for option 3, no uplift and a freeze on the current basic and special responsibility allowances. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doughty. I now call upon Councillor Taylor to give his views on this, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor and members, I do not intend to stand for council in future years. So an uplift in the stipend is of less personal advantage for me. However, with my conscience quite as clear, I would prefer that members would vote for option 2, the higher amounts, as I firmly believe that council needs to attract people of all ages and of all strata of society, not just the most wealthy and those who are retired. However, we have an independent panel, we have an independent remuneration panel, which has recommended the 4.04 increase, which is considerably lower than inflation. And I would have to say, well, why do we have an independent remuneration panel if we do not take their advice? I will therefore take their advice and I will vote for option 1.
Thank you, councillor Taylor. And the next on my list here is councillor Hollier.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by saying I completely agree with the Conservatives, at least insofar as their comments relate to their own allowances. It is completely right that the Conservatives, who have presided over rampant inflation, who have trashed the economy, and who have crashed the pound, should show some contrition for their collective incompetence. As such, I understand and welcome their attempt to assuage their guilt. However, for the rest of us, it remains an absurd situation that we have been placed in, having to vote on our own allowances. The Independent Remuneration Panel in 2019 recommended that allowances should be increased in line with staff pay, and this has happened without note in 2020 and 2021. Following the staff pay award this year, council officers were making arrangements to apply option 1 as the assumed fairer rate. However, due to the Labour group seeking option 2 and the higher 7% rate, we're unfortunately in the position we're in tonight, although I recognise Labour have now changed their position. With either option 1 or option 2, allowances in real terms have fallen by more than 10% since the 2019 IRP. We cannot pretend, as the Conservatives would have it, that councillors are immune to inflation or that further real terms cuts won't impact our ability to serve our communities or who can afford to be a councillor. Whilst the Tories might not think that they are worth it, I am proud of the value I offer my community. And as Councillor Doughty talks about doing things for the community, I'll recount some of them. Since the election, we progressed Haxby Station further than anyone thought possible, and we are on the verge of opening Haxby and Wigginton Library, both projects that would never have happened if we'd had Conservative councillors, with millions of pounds of investment in our community as a result. I've helped residents with problems big and small, from planning to antisocial behaviour to broken streetlights and pavements, and all for the grand total of 3p per week per household. The Conservatives might also like to think carefully about where their proposals would lead, to a council solely the preserve of the independently wealthy or retired. The Liberal Democrat group will be supporting the independent recommendation of 4.04%. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Hollier. And the last speaker on my list here is councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I'm being a bit lazy tonight because I sat back and let councillor Doughty say most of what I would have said. Yes, it's very, very convenient. The independent remuneration review panel, should I say, reporting this morning, as it gives everybody, or most everybody in this room, a get out from the previous grubby little arrangement that you were all cooking up. But I was going to say, after that report, even you lot, all of you, nobody would have dared vote for option 2. And then councillor Taylor spoiled that for me, but I'll be voting for option 3, as you would imagine. And I'm going to keep questioning why this review panel is set to report after next year's local elections and not before. As I've said previously, and I'll keep saying, sitting councillors should not be deciding their own levels of remuneration. Members' allowances for the 2023-27 period should be decided now, prior to the election, unless some of you is hoping for more massive hikes after you think the electorate's forgotten about it. Now, what councillor Taylor said tonight, in that he's wanting to go for option 2 because he isn't standing and it won't affect him, that's how the review panel should be working. They should be producing a report prior to the election. The allowance level should then be set for the next group of councillors. You're going to be in this exact same position in 2023 after the election.
Thank you, councillor Waters. I don't think there really are. Councillor Crawshaw.
Just extremely quickly, thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to respond to Councillor Waters there, I completely agree that we should be setting the pay in this administration for the future one. I completely agree that we should be taking the independent review panel's recommendation at every stage, and that's what the Labour Group will do. So actually, in a sense, it doesn't matter whether that's set immediately post the next election or before. We would prefer it to be done before, but whatever they recommend, the independent review panel recommendation will be the recommendation that the Labour Group supports.
Thank you, Councillor Crawshaw, and I've got Councillor de Gorne who wishes to speak. Councillor de Gorne.
Yeah, just briefly, to make clear my group position, I actually entirely agree with Councillor Crawshaw. The reason that we arrived at the position in 2019 was to try and resolve that matter and to have a clear, gradual uplift in line with the increases that are paid to the staff. And that seems to be the most sensible approach. The difficulty we've had, of those of us who've been on the council longer can remember instances where the remuneration panel met immediately before an election, and because of the looming election, we ended up in a position where the allowances were eroded, and that created problems further down the line to maintain that access and diversity of councillors we want to try and achieve. So I do think whilst the position has changed since the group leaders meeting, I would say that, obviously if the group leaders had had the benefit of the views of the independent remuneration panel at that point in time, when we probably would have avoided having to have this debate now, but we are where we are. So I certainly will be supporting option one in line with their recommendations, and would hope that they would take this situation into account when they look at recommendations next time to try and take account of the potential that there may be a flat rate increase to try and benefit the low paid across in council employees.
Thank you, Councillor de Gorne. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this item? Now, I have received indications that a named vote should take place on this. Can I gauge opinion in this chamber as to whether that is required or not? Councillor Douglas.
Sorry, apologies, Lord Mayor. I didn't hear what you said. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes. What I did say was that I've received indications that a named vote should be taken on this item. And is that the general consensus of opinion in this chamber?
We don't have strong opinion in either direction, Lord Mayor, thank you.
Okay, well, what we'll do then is go straightforward votes on options 1, 2, or 3. I think that's probably the simplest way of dealing with this. So can I ask members then to raise their hands in favour of option 1? That's 38 in favour. Abstentions?
We've got option 2.
Those against? No, I'm done. For the sake of completeness, I just want to go through option 1, option 2, those in favour. Option 3, those in favour.
No abstentions. So option 1 is selected by Council Chair.
Okay. It seems therefore that option 1 is the one that will be implemented. Can I thank members for that? Right, let's move back to the established agenda. Item 8 was motions on notice. We have 3 motions on notice submitted under Standing Order B13. These are included in the list of notices of motions and amendments contained in Agenda Supplement 2. The first motion relates to delivering effective customer services to York residents, and I now invite Councillor Webb to move that motion, and I'll remind him that he has 5 minutes maximum, please, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Council, this motion matters to residents. This motion tackles issues that we will have all heard about when speaking to people in and around York. Our excellent customer service team is being let down by this Lib Dem Green executive's decisions. And it is because of these decisions taken by that Lib Dem Green executive that we here are not delivering effective customer services to our residents, and I mean us. When there is an issue that the council should fix, residents often reach for the phone first. Why? Well, firstly, 1 in 10 are not digitally connected. Secondly, it's often easier to talk through a problem. And thirdly, and most importantly, people want to know that they are being heard. Digital services are, of course, very important, and of course, many residents will happily go online, but not everybody. Certainly not when some of the digital services that are not exactly firing all cylinders either. Let's take Digital Res Park as a case in point. The policy decisions that have been made by the Lib Dems has led to the current poor waiting times. Recently, the average was up to 18 minutes. This, remember, is an average, meaning that if some people are getting a response straight away, then many others are waiting a lot longer than 18 minutes, maybe 36, 40 minutes, something like that. And of course, this doesn't take into account residents who just give up. I spoke to one resident who tried all day between different activities in her life to get in touch with the council and ended up giving up several times. Older residents, less likely to wait for longer periods of time, and some cannot navigate option-based customer service phone lines. Residents don't have the time or the inclination to deal with long waits. And to make matters worse, the callback service was also axed by this administration. I spoke to one gentleman in his 90s, lives in Heworth. He was worried about his council tax. As we know, there have been various national grants applied to various people for various reasons recently, and this resident thought that a grant would be applied to his account automatically. He rang to check. He waited and he waited, but he struggled to get in touch with anyone. As a result of not being able to get through to anyone, he had to progress as he thought best without the advice he needed. This led him to not paying his bill on time. He was fined, and he had to pay his council tax in full rather than the parts that he normally would. In the end, after the intervention from myself and others, he received the grant he was due, but not until after a lot of distress. These are the sorts of problems that are caused by the decisions made by the Lib Dems and the Greens in power. Labour's motion seeks to improve things for residents and staff who often face unwarranted anger from residents frustrated by the process. Labour is asking that you do the following as soon as possible. Look to reinstate the callback service. Review operating hours. Actively look at services from a user-friendly perspective. Monitor and record abusive calls in order to protect our staff. More than anything else, Labour asks that this administration accepts the frustrations and difficulties created by their decisions. Please vote for the motion and vote against the wrecking amendment, an amendment that seeks to let the Lib Dems and the Greens squirm out of admitting responsibility for their actions and squirm out of taking action in response to their disastrous decisions. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. May I have a seconder to that motion, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Lomas.
In
Yes.
seconding this motion, I must note that there is a proposed amendment. This is clearly a wrecking amendment, and I'm very disappointed that it's been accepted onto the order paper. I'm certain that many points relating to this will be made during the debate on that amendment. This motion is about the challenges that our residents face in contacting their council. There are some specific resolutions that will build the confidence of staff facing work challenges at the same time as offering a simple solution for residents who need to contact their council. I want to focus on the callback service. This enables people to avoid a frustrating wait, sometimes for hours, for their call to be answered. It means that staff are not faced with a resident who is exasperated about the length of time they have waited, which is certainly a trigger for abuse. It means that residents can go about their day safe in the knowledge that someone from their council will call them back. It also means that for those who choose to remain on the line, their wait will be shorter because fewer people are in the queue. It really is simple, and we must reinstate it as a solution, not only to the waiting times faced by residents, but also to reduce abusive and distressing conversations for staff. We must remember that not everyone has the privilege of digital connection. Not everyone has the time to wait for hours, especially during their working day. We must remember that we are answerable to the residents we represent. And I want to say to the administration, there is no shame in acknowledging that for a number of complex reasons, we aren't providing the level of service that we should be right now. Rather than voting through a wrecking amendment, we should all be working together, and I know how keen you are on that phrase, to improve the situation for the benefit of the residents we serve.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Now, I have received notice of an amendment to this motion from Councillor Eyre, as included in the agenda supplement. So I now invite Councillor Eyre to move the amendment, please. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Let me begin by saying the Liberal Democrat Group absolutely recognises the overarching concerns this motion raises. This amendment simply seeks to remove the politically motivated misrepresentation of the issue. Customer Service Department staff work exceptionally hard and they're very dedicated. This has been recognised by Councillor Craghill and myself at numerous decision sessions, and the leader and myself singled out these staff in particular for a thank you event in April of this year. Just as with other councils, the emergency services, health, and even the private sector, our customer service phone services are struggling to cope. As was made clear at the scrutiny meeting where this was discussed, pre-COVID, service levels and performance were high within the current resource envelope. The situation has only become more pressing because of staff shortages, as well as an additional workload, be that through increased demand or administration of additional vital support schemes. Prior to COVID, the current resource levels delivered high service levels and performance. Officers have been crystal clear, service levels would not have been affected to the extent they are if they had been able to fill vacancies and not had the additional workload put upon them. While it is clearly an unacceptable situation that many residents have faced increased delays, we should note the service has had an improving recruitment position and performance is improving. As the amendment shows, wait times have dropped from 5.5 minutes in October to 3.3 in November. As the amendment notes, recruitment has been ongoing since summer 2021, and there are still 6 vacancies, with 2.5 vacancies recruited to, but not yet occupied. Recruitment in the public sector is an issue shared across all teams in all councils across the country, be that HGV drivers, care staff, or customer service staff. It's yet another legacy of government cuts and decades of austerity. Staff retention remains vital, and that's why already this year, all staff between April and September received a staff retention payment of 10%. We have created a dedicated hour every Thursday for staff training. We have introduced flexible working, be that locations or hours. We've removed the 2-shift system and we've implemented new technology to assist staff. One area I have constantly flagged is the unacceptable abuse our dedicated staff often receive. I know work has happened already and is continuing to offer support while we work with comms across the private sector to address the issue and raise awareness of how customer service staff should be treated. The amendment notes that policies in place for staff dealing with both abusive customers, but increasingly the distressing conversations. Weekly training and support sessions have been implemented to further support staff. Regarding the callback service, while due to the high workload, it was necessary to temporarily suspend it, it will, as planned, return when vacancies are filled and new staff have been trained. I would urge all councillors to support this amendment and continue to work together to support our staff and residents and leave party politics behind.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Colwick, you have 3 minutes maximum, please.
As the original motion and colleagues have noted, customer service staff are the very front line of council services and do an outstanding job, often in difficult circumstances. And we cannot ignore the delays that are clearly causing significant concern to residents. However, as Councillor Eyre has just outlined, the original motion fails to correctly present the causes and context of the issue, opting instead for political sensationalism. We agree that the wait times experienced by residents, though improving, are still unacceptable. However, it's wrong and ingenuous of the Labour Group to reduce this to an issue of budget proposals, particularly as budget amendments submitted by the Labour Group since 2019 have made no mention of a further investment in customer service at any time. It's also misleading and inaccurate to imply that all calls that were abandoned were not answered in some other way. The online services and solutions continue to be developed, including web chat options. Moving services to a digital offer clearly does need to recognise the requirements of those residents who do not have adequate access to digital services. Increased calls to parking due to the changes in the Red Park system are well rehearsed, but recently this has seen a scrutiny review take place. There are issues in the new approach that need to be addressed and fixed. This is recognised. Overall, it's clear that recruitment remains the key issue, and it is imperative that we continue to fill those current vacancies in order to return the service to an acceptable level. Sufficient capacity is key to improving the current situation. Rushing to reinstate the callback service immediately would most definitely make the issue worse, further reducing the service level, creating additional pressures for staff, and increasing complaints, and in turn, possibly, the levels of frustration and abuse being faced by staff. This issue of abuse is incredibly serious. Again, it is wrong to suggest that staff receive no support. The amendment notes this, whilst retaining the original resolution of exploring improved approaches. I'm sure we all agree that this is a serious issue which needs addressing. However, misrepresenting, scaremongering is not the way to go about it. The amendment retains almost all of the original resolutions while seeking to put a more comprehensive background, and I would urge colleagues to support the amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Colwick. I now invite debate on the amendment. Can I remind members that there is no overall time limit on debate, but each member is restricted to 3 minutes, please. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This amendment is a denial of reality, I'm afraid to say. Absolutely everybody in this room wants to support the call centre staff. It is completely unacceptable that they receive any form of abuse at all. But actually, the report that came to scrutiny, this report here, makes clear that we don't know how much abuse they receive because we don't monitor and record how many abusive calls are received through the call centre. So that means that we anecdotally believe that there's been an increase in abuse, but we have no empirical data to be able to support that. We have no way of knowing whether the systems that we put in place to try to reduce that abuse are working or not. So actually to say that we are doing all we can to reduce abuse and you know, all those kind words about it being unacceptable is all undone by the fact that we have no actual meaningful way of being able to say this is how much abuse is being received. Likewise, this amendment suggests that the reason why we've got these problems is an increased workload since the pandemic. It is increased for individual members in that call centre, but actually the number of calls received by this council has dropped. So in 2019-2020, it was just shy of 60,000 phone calls to the call centre. 2021, it dropped by 20,000. It then started to increase again, and most recent data is that it's at 55, 56,000. But the reason for that increase, if you look a little bit more into the detail, is largely down to calls to parking. And we've been already mentioned that we've had to do an individual bit of scrutiny on the impact of this administration's policy poorly implemented that drove a huge spike in calls and complaints through the call centre about parking. What these figures don't record is the direct calls into parking services. So actually, when we're talking about not knowing how many calls have been abandoned or haven't been answered or haven't been properly resolved, it's because we don't actually collect and collate that information in a clear way. Likewise, we don't know how many people get through to an answer phone and then never get a response back. We have no sense of that. And it is a policy decision that has caused this situation, because in 2019, we took a policy decision to leave 7.5 vacant full-time equivalent posts and accept a redundancy, so 8.5 full-time equivalent posts. We've subsequently lost more people, and you mentioned the retention, the bonus there. Our scrutiny committee was told that actually that hadn't worked. That wasn't an effective way of retaining staff. So all of these things that you've tried to put in here to try to suggest that this is adding context is nonsense. And actually the people who know about what is going on are the staff in the call centre and the residents who are trying to get through. And we're trying to get through to you and this administration that what's happening here is not acceptable. It's not working for anybody. And actually trying to blunt
That's 3 minutes, Councillor Crawshaw. Again, I hate to stop you in full flow, but that is the limit. Are there any other speakers, please? Can't see that. Yes.
Councillor Norman.
Sorry, I didn't recognise it. The man behind the mask, sorry.
That's fine. I think I speak from a fairly unusual position, maybe in this chamber, as someone who until quite recently was in a customer service facing role in the public sector. And it is very true to say that recruitment is a sector-wide problem. And I don't necessarily disagree with Councillor Colwick's description that recruitment is the core of this issue and the core of why there's a problem here. But I don't think he really understands why recruitment is a problem in the sector and why it's a problem here in this council. And the answer is conditions. And basic working conditions. And the reason is that somebody can get a similar pay packet for doing a very much more simple job that involves a lot less being yelled at by people. And that's the simple answer. And it therefore stands that the simple answer to recruitment is to make conditions better, to improve things for workers, to make sure that they're getting a better deal and a better lot when they're talking about things and when they're talking to customers. And so I've seen in my sector a lot of people leaving their jobs to take other work, and people who didn't want to because they felt they had value and skill and talent and were upset that they weren't able to use that to the best of their ability because they didn't feel supported by the political management. Now, I think that is a very true thing here. And we've heard Councillor de Gorne already talking today about hiring freezes. Again, in light of what Councillor Crawshaw was just saying, they're a worrying prospect, and perhaps Councillor Eyre a commitment maybe today not to have hiring freezes in this particular crucial area. But as I say, recruitment is clearly the key issue. And simply put, if we do not tackle conditions and we do not tackle abuse of staff, and we refuse to record it, we refuse to acknowledge it, we refuse to create the statistics around that, which this amendment does. I mean, it seems to have some sort of strange line about us already recording statistics, which is well, it's untrue, isn't it, really? And there are several other points in here where simple wording changes have simply rendered sentences untruths, to put it politely, perhaps lies if we're being more honest. So I think yeah, you should go away and look at this more carefully. Maybe sort of read your amendment and come back to us. And I would vote down this amendment on the basis of that.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor Webb, did you indicate you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I've got my right to reply.
Oh, of course you have, but is this extra or?
No, it's that.
Okay.
It's just everybody else looked like they were a bit fed up, so I thought that was that.
I'm sure they're not. Right, okay, you're right to reply then.
Anybody else want to jump in? No? Right, great. Councillor Cullick, I'm glad you've accepted that the current position is unacceptable. You are the politicians in charge, you're the decision makers, and you're not doing a good enough job. Council, customer services in York has changed because this Lib Dem Green administration has changed it. Another thing that has changed is housing repairs have got worse. Potholes have got deeper. Hedges have gone uncut. This is a Lib Dem-led problem. The Lib Dems who have been in power for many years now. Earlier tonight, Councillor Ashton highlighted that he had no plan or idea on how to support residents. Well, this amendment doesn't help either. It does not address the frustration faced by residents when they try to highlight frustrations. I'm glad in the amendment that you admit that you axed the callback, and I'm also glad that as Labour have raised the issue tonight, it shamed you a bit and you're looking at U-turning in the future. But I hope that this will come sooner rather than later. In summary, this is a wrecking amendment. It's a hatchet job, right? This amendment seeks to cover up failings of this Lib Dem Green administration who are letting staff down, they're letting residents down, and quite frankly, they're letting themselves down. So vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. So let's go to the vote on the amendment then, please. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hands now. And keep them raised while we can count, please. Okay, thank you. Those who wish to vote against, please show.
And 16 against.
And those who wish to abstain. No.
The amendment is carried, Chair.
So that's 22 for and how many against?
16 against.
16 against, so the amendment is carried. So we now move to the substantive motion as amended and debate on this, please, if you wish, by raising your hands, 3 minutes each. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair. I thought Councillor Taylor got in just before me there, but it took me a little bit by surprise. Obviously, when we saw your wrecking amendment published, we knew we were going to lose this tonight in spite of Councillor Webb's amazing rhetoric. We didn't really stand much of a chance, but then looking at how the numbers have dropped off of administration representatives here, then had our 3 councillors that were missing been here tonight, then we might have stood a chance of winning it, but we don't force our councillors to come to council meetings when they've got COVID because we recognise the risk that puts other councillors at. I would like to thank councillors. If you think back when you were Lord Mayor, Councillor Culloch, you might remember having to suspend a meeting with an hour's notice that was under threat of your councillors coming with COVID. Anyway, we move off the point. So I just wanted to remind you, you looked a little bit confused. I do want to thank Councillors Culloch and Councillors Eyre for what they have brought before us tonight, because they've showed us a great bit of Lib Demery. So all of the residents in the city who are suffering dreadful customer service, and you know it, because you get it off them on a daily, weekly basis, the frustrations that they're having, trying to get through to this council to resolve their issues. Well, all of those residents who experience those problems have seen the way that the Lib Dems respond to them by making false claims against political opponents, by pretending that everything is actually all right, and then by pretending that actually we're not really in power. It's got nothing to do with us. It's something to do with the government. It's got something to do with things that are beyond our control. Well, the residents know the truth of it because they experience it on a daily basis, and they know when they're being spun to. They know when you're pretending that the world is not the way that it actually is. So thank you for that. I'm sure we'll be using part of it on our leaflets in Haxby and Huntingdon and Rawcliffe and Westfield and all the other places that, as far as we can gather, are going to be voting Labour in the elections come May 2023. So, once again, it is a wrecking amendment. It's a real shame that you're in denial about how badly you are running this council, but believe me, the residents know it, and you're going to find out in May. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Does any other member wish to speak on the substantive motion as amended? Councillor Taylor, sorry, yes.
Well, firstly, Lord Mayor, Councillor Kilbane has frightened me. There's people going around the chamber with COVID. I was wondering whether to drink this bottle of hand sanitizer. I don't believe the motion, sorry, the amendment was a wrecking amendment. I think this is a very serious issue. I think it was right for the Labour Party to bring the issue before council. I do believe it was politicised, but I do think there are serious reasons why the council has currently has a poor response rate in terms of customer complaints. And I think Councillor Norman has told us that this exists in other parts of the public sector. I'm certainly aware it happens in the private sector as well, because I've been hanging on a telephone line for half an hour to an hour while trying to reach other companies in the private sector. Councillor Norman also says that the issue is about recruitment. We've all said that the issue is about recruitment, and I think the administration does need to look at how better we can bring people into customer services, how we can attract them better. I would just like to ask one small question, which is about the callback service. And Nigel has said in his amendments that the callback service was suspended and is due to come back. And the question is, do we have a timescale for that to come back?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Webb, you do have the opportunity to reply for 3 minutes if you wish.
I'm not going to take 3 minutes, but on Councillor Taylor's last question, Councillor Eyre looked generally worried at the idea of this, and I think this is the important thing. When, right? This amendment has ruined the motion, but if the positive thing is that the callback service is reinstated at some time sooner rather than later, as I said, then great stuff. But it really is a massive shame that people keep throwing this word of politicising these motions. We are politicians, and politicians are here to make decisions on things. As I said, the administration are the decision makers. And sadly, through their decisions, things have got worse. This amendment has meant that scrutiny has been removed to a certain extent. So I do hope that eventually Councillor Eyre can answer Councillor Taylor's question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Let's move then to the vote on the motion. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. And those who are against, please show.
Okay, so that's 15 against
15. And any abstentions, please? No, so that is 23 votes for and 15 against. The motion is therefore carried. Right. Our next motion is York opposes voter ID requirements, and I would like now to invite Councillor Hollier to move this second motion. Please, Councillor Hollier, you've got 5 minutes to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think I also need to accept the Labour amendment to the motion, and whether there are any steps that I need to take to do that at this point.
Very well. Monitoring officer.
Seeking the council's consent to alter his motion to incorporate
Right.
the Labour amendment.
I assume that's acceptable.
Not only acceptable, but would be happy to second the motion on that basis.
Okay. Carry on, Councillor Hollier.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Lord Mayor. The first Liberal Democrat group motion tonight further highlights an issue which has been making national headlines this week, as the Conservatives forced through a new requirement for all would-be voters to present a photo ID prior to being allowed to cast their vote. A better example of a solution looking for a problem you could not find. Showing ID at polling stations would prevent exactly one type of crime, that of impersonating someone else in order to cast a single fake vote. There is a reason there are next to no cases of this nationally. Just one conviction and one caution in the 2019 elections. Can you imagine a more convoluted or obvious way to try and steal an election? In my ward in 2019, I received 2,819 votes, and my nearest Conservative challenger received 810. To steal that election, the Conservative candidate would have needed to have pretended to be, throughout the day, 2,010 different voters. He'd have needed to have cast one vote every 30 seconds and would needed to have crossed his fingers that none of those 2,010 either subsequently tried to vote or indeed had already voted, which would have blown the scheme wide open. That's a lot of wigs and fake moustaches. Say even Scooby-Doo has only needed 498 disguises in his lifetime, and he's had since the 70s. So what's the real motivation for this change? And I don't think we have to look very far. In the trial areas in 2019, 1,968 people were turned away for not having the correct ID. Of those, 740 did not return. And this was in the context of the huge public information campaign in those areas, warning the public that there simply isn't time for now. In order to stop a minuscule number of crimes, the government is willing to stop up to 2 million people from voting easily across the country, potentially including thousands of York's residents. And who are these people that might be stopped from voting? Well, the government's own research found that it's those with severely limiting disabilities, the unemployed, people without qualifications, and those who have never voted before, i.e. the young, were all less likely to hold any form of photo ID. Do any of those groups sound like your typical Conservative voter? But they're not even trying to hide it. Student IDs and young people public transport passes will not be accepted as a valid ID, but older people rail passes will be. With 67% of Conservative voters being over 70, you don't really need to be a conspiracy theorist to see how this is an attempt to suppress voter turnout amongst groups less likely to vote for the Conservatives. So the minister taking these proposals through Parliament, who incidentally was in the year above me at school, currently has, according to electoral calculus, a 27% chance of retaining his seat in the next elections, I'm sure it hasn't crossed his mind how removing a few voters, perhaps more likely to vote for his opponent, might nudge that percentage up a bit. Beyond the fact that this is an expensive and undemocratic approach, the implementation of the new rules is now causing genuine concern in councils across the country. Councils are not being given the appropriate time, resource, clarity, and detailed guidance to implement any changes to the electoral process without risking access to the vote. In September, the Electoral Commission issued a stark warning to the government over their fundamental concerns and alarmed over these plans, which it said could not be delivered in a way which is fully secure, accessible and workable in time for the local elections in May. The Conservative chair of the LGA this week warned ministers that there is insufficient time for councils to prepare for the change and it will risk May's election integrity. Whilst work is underway locally to prepare for the changes, serious concerns remain over the additional strain on staff and resources that the preparation for the introduction of these changes will place on already overstretched local services. So I hope all councillors will join us in standing up for voters' rights, highlighting the need to get photo ID and to call out this outrageous attempt at taxpayer-funded voter suppression. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoyer. And Councillor Kilbane, do you wish to formally second the amended motion?
Formally second the amended motion, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kilbane. We'll now move direct to debate. Again, there is no overall time limit, but each member is limited to 3 minutes. So, Councillor Wardby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I happily would like to second this motion. At the core of the motion is really the simple idea that the government should not spend millions to put up barriers to people taking part in our democracy. We need to be combating the huge challenges that undermine our democracy and work to increase turnout and participation, not put up paywalls around polling stations. These new rules really put the very integrity of our elections at stake, as the government is insistent on creating serious problems that will affect May's elections in their search of how to resolve non-existent voter fraud. The simple fact is that in 2019, you were more likely to have been struck by lightning 3 times than to have voted after a phony voter. Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee made a prediction that 1.1 million people will not cast a vote at future elections as a result of this reform. The 344-page legal guidelines setting out how the system will operate are unlikely to come into effect until January, giving council teams no time to adapt. The onus is, as always, is on the councils to fix the mess that the government has created. One major complication is the duty of councils to issue people with an electoral identity document. If they do not have any of the agreed forms of photo ID, such as a driving licence or passport, people can apply online, by post or in person at the council office, but this process is not expected to begin until at least the new year. There are concerns that many people will be unaware of the new rules and may only apply at the last minute. No clarity exists either on what will happen if people miss the deadline for application and have no access to a valid ID on the day of the election. Another big concern is finding enough temporary staff for polling stations, as many will be put off for the stress of having to check IDs and turn people away. Reality is that whilst we know that this will be incredibly difficult to put into place, the extent of the challenge is not even clear yet. With less than 5 months to go until the local elections, this is becoming a serious concern. That is why this motion also asks for council officers to bring forward a public report outlining the preparation and most urgent issues ahead of May. Electoral officials have repeatedly urged ministers to delay the rollout of mandatory voter ID checks at May's local elections, warning that a short timetable and lack of clarity about the rules could cause thousands of people to be disenfranchised. The fact that May's elections are used as an experiment for these changes further shows how little this government cares about local democracy. To quote David Davis.
Councillor Wardby, that's 3 minutes,
I've
I'm afraid.
got a sentence to say. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. To quote David Davis, something that I never thought I would do. This is a liberal solution in search of a non-existent problem. Please support the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wardby. The next speaker is Councillor Doughty, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I do find it hilarious that what we have here is a motion from the illiberal Democrats lecturing about democratic deficit after all their attempts to overturn the nationwide referendum in 2016, or even still doing so more than 3 years after the country had made its majority democratic decision. My belief is that a secure electoral system is vital for a healthy democracy, and the public must have confidence that our elections are secure and fit for the 21st century. Asking voters to bring ID to their polling station is an important way of achieving this. ID to Vote has been backed by the Electoral Commission, an organisation for security and cooperation in Europe's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which states that its absence is a security risk. Without it, it's harder to take out a library book or collect a parcel at a post office than it is to vote in someone else's name. Many countries within the Lib Dems' beloved European Union require it, as well as other trusted democracies in Scandinavia and Canada, for example. There have been reports of personation, assuming the identity of another person with the intention to deceive. Confirmed cases are low, as it's difficult to prove and prosecute. It can only be uncovered when a real voter tries to vote and officials investigate thoroughly. ID eliminates the risk of personation. In Northern Ireland, voters have been required to produce personal identification since 1985, with photographic ID being required since 2003, when introduced by the last Labour government. The Electoral Commission has also commented that since the introduction of photo ID in Northern Ireland, there's been no reported cases of personation, and voter confidence is consistently higher than the rest of Great Britain. Cabinet Office published data shows that 98% of electors already own one of the documents specified in the Elections Act. These include various concessionary travel passes, Ministry of Defence ID, photo card, parking permits issued as part of the Blue Badge scheme, driver's licenses and passports. Anyone without a form of ID will also be able to apply for a new voter authority certificate from the local authority, either online, by post or in person, meaning that actually no voter will be disenfranchised. The Electoral Commission will also be delivering a national communications campaign for voter ID. The Council's Director of Governance confirms it is expected that the application process and procedure detailed by government will be outlined and in force in January, and will contact councillors further when received. Rather than scaremongering, the Lib Dems could ensure their hapless, unorganised administration will be ready to assist with getting impartial information out to our citizens about the change. There might actually finally be a useful purpose for their propaganda sheet. I mean, your city publication that goes to every household, and crikey, make sure it's on the front rather than tucked inside so it's seen before hitting the recycling pile. By all means, you should bring
Councillor Doughty, that's also 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
Bring a report to a public meeting to outline this council's preparations, but you won't be surprised to hear I won't be supporting your motion.
You wanted to finish your sentence as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, and the next speaker is Councillor Vassy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm glad of the amendment. I have to confess I was struggling with a motion that set out the gross unfairness of the Tory plans to require photo ID in elections, but didn't advance solutions. Councillor Hollier has eloquently set out what lies behind the plans. Yes, any form of photo ID rollout that disenfranchises a section of the population would be grotesque. But I'm not entirely sure that pointing this out to our government is likely to result in progress. I believe we need to advance solutions to protect the electorate. The simplest of these, if the government insists on photo ID, is to call their bluff and insist that the widest variety of photo ID can be presented at polling stations. There are many options. There's the UK citizen card introduced by a Labour government in 1999. There's student ID cards. There are all sorts of photo ID cards. And if the government listens and responds positively, if it broadens the range of photo ID cards that can be presented, the challenge can be addressed and managed. If they refuse to be more flexible, then I think local authorities should seek legal advice with the aim of accepting a broad range of photo ID cards and challenge the government on it to help people obtain citizen cards, for example, and the postal votes option that has been promoted. But I think, to sum up, I don't think we can have confidence that telling the government that what it's doing is grotesque is necessarily going to result in better behaviour from government.
Thank you, Councillor Vassie. And the next speaker on my list is Councillor Smalley. Councillor Smalley, 3 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be brief in my comments, as my colleagues have already outlined the many serious concerns the Liberal Democrat group have regarding these new voter ID laws. This last week, we've seen the House of Commons, often called the mother of parliaments, vote to suppress democracy. There have been a fair few shameful moments in Parliament this year, but this must make the top 10 at least. Through the bill's passing early this year, it was clear that the government was trying their best to rush this taxpayer-funded disenfranchisement without any adequate debate. The report stage, where MPs debate amendments, was cut to 2 hours and 20 minutes, much shorter than tonight's meeting of full council. A bombardment of reforms were lumped together, including further changes to postal voting and proxy voting, changes to local electoral systems, and much more. And even after May's local elections, there'll be more changes to come. We all know the hard work that goes into making sure as many local residents as possible have their voice heard and get to a polling station on polling day. And even despite all our best efforts in the room tonight, local turnout rates are well below what we would like. Now, one of my hobby horses is I guess Lincoln, and in 2021 they had local elections during COVID. And I don't know if anyone in this hall helped out in other areas that had elections in 2021, but on the polling card, residents were told to bring a pen in terms of COVID safety, bring a pen, and then you have to share one. And time again, when knocking on doors, we were told, "Oh, I'm not going to vote. You know, it says I need a pen. I can't find one. I don't have one." And that's a pen. And so imagine them on top of that having to find an ID card. They might not even have one. Many, hundreds of thousands of people in the UK don't have a form of ID that's suitable. And I was thinking to myself, actually, if I was hard pressed to find a pen, sometimes I struggle in my own house. So I think that really sort of highlighted to me that there are so many barriers to people finding half an hour on polling day to go to the local polling station already, from childcare to work commitments, in this instance, to finding a pen during COVID. And actually, this government, sort of sponsored disenfranchisement is yet another step to make it harder to vote and have your voice heard. When it comes to the integrity of elections and democracy, the government's attention should be focused on increasing voter turnout, fixing the unfair electoral system, and making election finances far more transparent. And yet the government has chosen to invent solutions to a non-existent issue of voter fraud. £180 million will be spent to make it harder for people to participate in democracy. We must be unanimous in our condemnation of this absurd waste of taxpayer money. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Move to the vote, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smalley. My next speaker is Councillor. Sorry.
Move to the vote, Lord Mayor.
Seconded.
Much with that notice to move straight to the vote.
Right. Shall we do that? People happy to move? Are members happy to move straight to the vote?
Have a show of hands just to be comfortable.
Okay,
All those in favour of moving to the vote.
right. Let's have a show of hands. Let's have a show of hands.
All
Who,
those in favour of moving to the
those
vote.
in favour of moving to the vote? Well, that's pretty unanimous.
Move to the vote.
Okay. Then those who, and councillor Hall, I guess you don't want to reply. Right.
I've got
Let's move
pages
to the
of
vote then.
zingers down
Those
here,
in
but
favour of the
they'll
motion,
bring
please show.
The motion as amended.
Okay, is that?
36 in favour of the motion.
36. Those against?
One. One.
One. And no abstentions, I take it. I should make it clear that that was the motion as amended for the record.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's carried.
it is carried by how many?
36 to 1.
36 to 1. Thank you, members.
Right, you've got 9.
We now move to motion 3, which is the introduction of a council tax premium for second homes. I just want to mention here that we are perilously close to the 10-minute cutoff for the guillotine. If members are happy to discuss this tax raising motion with a minimum of debate, then fair enough. If not, I can suggest we move it to the next meeting. Can members please give me some indication? Go forward with it.
Can you move to defer it to the next meeting?
Lord Mayor, I wondered if there was some advice from the monitoring officer about people who have
Monitoring
second
officer.
homes. What?
That was partially his advice. Monitoring officer.
If the mover of the motion would instead like to move that business be deferred to the next meeting, and the council votes to defer the item. That's fine.
But point of order, Chair, the mover of the motion has left the meeting and did so several hours ago. And as
I
tabled,
understand that Councillor
I
Fenton.
thought it might be him, but as predicted, it's written on the papers.
Just a procedural question. I'm always want to ask a procedural question. As motions are allocated at the meeting on the basis of political bat, etc., if you were to move this, I believe one group will lose a motion at the next. And do we know which group that would even be? Is that...
Up to the meeting. Clearly, there's no appetite to defer it, so they've got.
Okay, well, let's go forward with it then. Councillor Fenton, I believe you're proposing this motion in place of councillor Fisher.
It would appear so, and I'll paraphrase. What Councillor Fisher would have said. Okay.
Does it?
Councillor Cullen needs to make it.
Excuse me, councillor Fenton. Councillor Colwick.
Brief declaration. You, Lord Mayor, it had been said earlier there would be an opportunity for clarification around declarations of interest at this point. And I would just declare that I'm in the process of administering an estate. And in that process, there's a property involved. It isn't a second home. It never will be a second home, but for the sake of complete clarity, I just would make that clear.
I think if it's not a second home, then I think you're quite in the clear. Councillor Colwick, aren't you? Yes. Would you like to stand again, councillor Fenton, and propose the motion,
Thank
please?
you very much. Lord Mayor, there is an issue which restricts the availability of housing in the city and contributes very little to the city's economy. It's estimated that 429 properties in the city are second homes. These are homes owned by people who have their main residence elsewhere and which are in use by them for less than 70 days. That's under 20% of the year and not rented out during the rest of the time. Many are investment properties where the owners keep them to benefit from their appreciating value. By restricting the housing supply, second homes maintain high property prices to the detriment of those local residents seeking to those who work here seeking to live here or remain here. The proposal before you would prepare the way for this council to impose 100% council tax premium on second homes to incentivise owners to return them to permanent occupation. The government has announced the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which will, once passed, give councils the power to impose this premium. We need to have prepared the way for this council to be able to implement this as soon as the legislation becomes live. York cannot afford to have large numbers of homes lying empty. This motion, if approved, will go some way to rectifying this injustice, and I would urge all members to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. Do we have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'll just stick to the second page. The premium from charging extra council tax on second homes will create a valuable new revenue stream that will help fund council priorities, such as helping to introduce more housing for local communities. Initial high-level analysis shows that the application of 100% premium on second homes in York could generate in excess of 740,000 in additional council tax revenue. I believe that many of us will share the dismay at the regressive and unfair nature of the council tax system. However, it is a sad reality that a decade of cuts from central government has left councils over-reliant on council tax income to provide crucial local services. And we have already built more, in 3 years, more affordable homes than the Labour government, Labour administration did in 4 years. So that's
Thank you, Councillor Hook.
a brief tracing.
Right, okay. We have 4 minutes before the 10-minute cut-off, so debate, please. Councillor Pavlovich, Councillor Waters after Councillor Pavlovich.
Well, I'll keep it brief because I haven't prepped anything. We'll be supporting it. It's certainly welcome. There are too many investment properties in York. We've seen whole estates, whole blocks, where the majority of them are empty because they're investments. We do feel, however, that there is a missed opportunity from the government, and that is to take into account second homes that are then let out as Airbnbs. And if that loophole was filled, then the revenue coming into York would be really quite considerable, given that we've got 2,000 plus of them.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlovich. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The irony shouldn't be lost on anybody that this motion comes to council exactly a year on from one aimed at reducing the ongoing conversion of family homes to student lets. A motion that, after wrecking attempts by the Green Lib Dem coalition, was eventually passed, and to which the executive then dedicated its time to not implementing. Tonight's motion refers to the 100% council tax premium generating £740,000 of extra income. Well, judging by the HMO recording over the years, I very much doubt the ability of this council to accurately record the numbers of second homes or the number of days occupied in a given year. But second home ownership is not the real reason for local residents being priced out of the local housing market, is it? It's the 4,000 or so student-let HMOs that cost the council £6 million in lost council tax revenue every year. So why is attention not concentrated on this council using its powers to stop further proliferation of that situation? This motion, whilst worthy of support, is just tinkering away at the edges without tackling the real problem that this administration refuses to face up to. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Waters, I beg your pardon. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll be really brief. It's just a couple of points, really, just to say that there's not many opportunities at our disposal to sort of obtain extra revenue and to also to ensure that local people have access to housing in their communities. And this premium on council tax bills for second homes will go some way to help with that housing crisis. It's not going to do anywhere near enough, but it will do something. I think the other thing that I really want to say was that the council desperately needs more powers from government to be able to control things like holiday lets and be able to avoid loopholes and close loopholes that can be abused by certain second home owners. And lastly, just to encourage members to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Pearce. Councillor Fenton, you have the opportunity to respond, or we can go straight to the vote.
Nothing further to add, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Right, can I see a show of hands, please, for those in favour of the motion? Right, that seems unanimous for those in the chamber. Thank you. So now, where are we, monitoring officer, with the guillotine?
30 seconds, Chair.
30 seconds. Right.
Questions for the leader, yeah.
Well, yes, indeed. Okay. Right. The next item is questions to the leader, but the guillotine is going to fall at 18 seconds. So. Right, that's it. That's it. So we now, the guillotine is now hovering. So item 10, we note. 10 of the agenda, we note. Item 11, report of executive member, Councillor de Gorne, we note. Item 12, scrutiny, report of the chair of Customer and Corporate Services Scrutiny Management Committee, we note. And item 13, appointments and changes to membership. We need to vote on this, members. Can I see a show of hands for supporting this?
Yeah, again, that's unanimous, Chair.
That is unanimous for those members present. Thank you very much indeed. Now, before I formally close the meeting, can I wish everyone in this chamber and other colleagues who are not here all the comfort and joy and peace this Christmas. But let us spare a thought for those who are lonely and isolated, for whom Christmas is a particularly miserable time, for all those who are struggling to make ends meet, and that is a growing number of people, and for all those unhappily embroiled in the nightmare of war, only a 2-hour plane ride away in Ukraine. Having said all that, I wish you all a very happy and peaceful Christmas, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.